Chapter 1 I am a reasonable person. The early morning at Duan Wang Fu was not different from any other day. In the kitchen, the servants moved to and fro without any hint of hurry. Ma Posi, after delivering the required pastries to the Niuan, came back to the kitchen with a group of Yahuan, but her face wasn't looking very well. "Hey, old sister, what's wrong? Why does your face looks terrible?" Another Posi, wearing a dark button Jio, handed a cup of tea over to the other woman and exclaimed in shock, "Didn't you just go to the Jingyuan, 6, to deliver the cheese? How come, don't even mention it. Wang Fei just woke up this morning. Rough labor servants like us couldn't even enter the yard. We only saw one of Wang Fei's attendants, Yin Lu Gunyang." When she spoke to that point, Ma Posi took a long swallow of tea, looked around at the surroundings and lowered her voice to Whipser. "I saw that the expressions of the people of Jinyuan weren't right, so I hurried back." Hearing this, the Posi who wore the lined jacket sighed. With an attitude composed, half being a spectator and half pitying, she said, "They hadn't even finished taking down the red canopies hanging in the Fu yet. Wang Fei had just married into the Fu for less than 2 months. After the wedding night, Wang Yi hadn't stepped a foot into the Jinyuan. In the last few days of sickness, Wang Yi had only sat for a period before leaving. No wonder the people of Jinyuan weren't looking very well. She once had the luck to see Wang Fei. She had been dignified and her appearance had also been beautiful. She didn't know which of those aspects Wang Yi didn't like. "Don't say nonsense, I just saw one of Feng Ce Fei's 11 Yahuan come over." Both of them knew the words that Ma Posi didn't say. They stopped talking and went back to their duties. In the Jinyuan, a host of Yahuan carefully waited upon the Wang Fei in her morning ablutions. A piece of first-rate silk brushed over fingertips that were as thin as green onions before being set to the side. There wasn't a hint of anger on the face of Chu Qingju, unlike the past few days, as her black silk flowing freely. She lazily took off her wrist a green jade bracelet before casually throwing it into a carved mahogany box. "This color is too old-fashioned." Upon hearing this, Jean Jean paused slightly before waving her hand at the female attendants behind her. Several other boxes were brought before Chu Qingju. Inside, there were pairs of different bracelets. Gold-wrought, pearl-encrusted, jade, of all colors, and none of them were ordinary. Her gaze swept across the rows of bracelets. In the end, her final choice was an exquisitely carved blood-red jade bracelet that, when contrasted against the pale wrist, was unspeakably beautiful. Seeing the situation, Jean Jean's expression slightly changed. In the past, Wang Fei had resented the phoenix blood jade bangle, 12, as being too garish and never worn it. Today, she had picked this jade at first glance. Thinking about the days since marrying into the Wang Fu, she felt bitterness in her heart. Before marriage, Wang Fei's personality had been warm and gentle. This would have been a virtue, but in a marriage into the imperial family, that personality was a handicap. Noticing Jean Jean's expression, Chu Qingju smiled faintly. She stood and spread her arms to let the maids dress her in her hand-picked wide-sleeved silk dress. 13. It was made from the highest quality of white brocade embroidered with shoe style. 14. Red plum blossoms. When the cloth swayed, it was as though there were real plum blossoms swaying in the wind. At the waist, there were a spice bag embroidered with 2 blossoming lotus flowers on a single stem and a jade-beaded lousy. 15. The long soft hair was coiled up into a fei xian ji. 16. A vibrant red peach blossom was drawn on the brow. Eyebrows like willow leaves. Lips as red as cherries. Just a glimpse was enough to be unspeakably bewitching. Pushing a wan bird, 17, and Cloud Buyao, 18, into her hair by herself, Chu Qingju slowly stood and enigmatically smiled as she looked out the winder. This time should be the time to pay respects. A few steps away from Jean Jean was Mu Jin who, upon hearing this, forced a smile and said, "Wang Fei, Since you were ill the last few days, Wang Yi told the Huiyuan, 20, so the Qishu, 21, wouldn't disturb your rest. Oh, gently caressing the red-stranded jade earrings on her earlobes, Chu Qingju leisurely sat down and adjusted into a somewhat comfier position. She accepted the warm water that Yin Lu handed over to rinse her throat. Ting the lid back on the cup before wiping the corner of her mouth, she said, since that is the case, send somebody to each yard to deliver the news that Ben Wang Fei, 22, has just recovered and has terribly missed all the Ce Fei and the Shijie. 23, the 4D Yahuan, 24, upon hearing this, exchanged glances between themselves. Even if they didn't know the reason why Wang Fei's personality upon waking had changed so much, they still obeyed and left. Coming out of the main building, a slightly worried Jin Zhan said, Wang Fei doesn't seem normal today since waking up, I don't know why. In this Wang Fu, everybody shows Wang Fei respect on the surface, but in their private time, they all go currying favor with that Ce Fei in Shiyuan. 25. Wang Fei has been married for 2 months. Other than the first 3 days where Wang Yi stayed in Jingyuan, he spent all his time with other concubines. It's humiliating for our Wang Fei. Yin Lu said with creased brows and a quiet voice, that Feng Ce Fei has such an attitude. She really thinks that she's worth something. She's just a Chia, 26. Yu Zhan, hearing what Yin Lu was saying, looked around surreptitiously and after not finding anyone in the surroundings, came closer and said, don't say too much. Even if Wang Yi favors, 27, Feng Ce Fei, he still gives Wang Fei the respect she's accorded. Don't make trouble for Wang Fei. This is called respect, Yin Lu snorted. Thinking about her mistress' warm and soft personality, she sighed in helplessness, whatever, Jin Zhan and I will go over to Feng and Jiang Ce Fei. The second-rank Yawans can go to the other Shijie. Mu Jin, who hadn't spoken, nodded, that's very good. Bai Luo and Pu Er are enough to invite Luo Shi, 28, and Han Shi. Among the Yahuan in Wang Fei's entourage, the first-ranked were named using flowers, the second using tea, the third and the heavy-labor Yahuan had no guidelines. Mu Jin and the other 3 had followed Wang Fei from Chang de Gongfu, 29, so they naturally followed Wang Fei. But the Wang Fu was much more complicated. Before marriage, Wang Fei had been neglected by her stepmother and hadn't learned how to manage a household. Consequently, it didn't even take 2 months after entering this place that she had gotten ill. Mu Jin had always been worried for Wang Fei, but seeing that Wang Fei today had the desire to establish herself in the Wang Fu, she took a sigh of relief. She didn't worry that Wang Fei would fight, she would only worry if Wang Fei still had the personality of mud. Seeing that all the Yahuan had retreated out, Chu Qingju stood and walked in front of a very large copper mirror. The craftsmanship was excellent. Even if it wasn't as clear as the silvered glass mirrors from before, it was still enough to distinguish a person's appearance. The girl in the mirror was only about 16 or 17. Her appearance was very beautiful. If she had lived in the era she did before, she would have been just a beautiful and proud high school student. Combing through the memories in her head, Chu Qingju sighed. Her father didn't care, her stepmother wasn't compassionate, her husband didn't have love and there was a crowd of troublesome Chia. The original had had a soft personality. In this complicated Wang Fu, she had mysteriously gotten seriously ill and mysteriously became occupied by her, this woman who didn't know what warmth was. It could be said that she had gotten no justice even in her death. Wang Fei, the kitchen has delivered breakfast. From the outside came a slightly thin male voice. It was probably one of the Taijian, 30, that had been assigned according to the imperial protocols. In Chu Qingju's memory, the original were not very close to these Taijian, but was full of courtesy as they were appointed before Wang Yi had been titled and during the time he had been in charge of the Department of Household Affairs, Dian's Hongxing. 31. Start service. Playing with the strands dangling from the gold biao, Chu Qingju turned to exit. Rui Xiang and Shu Kuei, who had been waiting in the neighboring room, quickly opened the curtains, one person holding them aside while another came over to support her to welcome Chu Qingju out. Both Rui Xiang and Shu Kuei were originally from the Wang Fu. They understood that even though Wang Fei treated them with courtesy, but compared to Yin Lu, Mu Jin, Jin Zhan and Yuzan, there was a difference in the amount of trust. The events that happened in the previous days would have magnified the difference. It was their luck that Wang Fei was weak. If she was just a bit stronger, they would have been thrown out. Who else would let them stay as first-rank Yahuan? Sitting down at a round pearwood table carved with safflower, Chu Qingju's eyes swept across the table. A goblet of wine-stewed pork shoulder, a bowl of swallow's next porridge with strands of black chicken accompanied by a multitude of similar fatty sides. The only dish that looked light was a small dish of sautéed lettuce stems. Waving away Shu Kuei, who had moved forward to serve her, Chu Qingju looked at the people bowing at the entrance with a smile on her face. You are the ones that deliver food from the kitchen. Wang Fei, Nukai, 32, holds duties in the kitchen. Those people didn't why Wang Fei would ask such a question, but they replied without any fear on their faces. Such a good Wang Fu's kitchen. Chu Qingju nonchalantly leaned back on her seat. Under the confused gazes of the others, her face darkened and then her hand swept the goblet of wine-stewed pig shoulder to the floor. Very quickly, the room became saturated with the smell of meat. Take them away and beat them. Nobody managed to respond. They didn't know why Wang Fei, who had a personality as soft as mud, would suddenly act up, and so nobody moved for a time. What is it? This a Wang Fei, cannot command you now. Qingju's large eyes narrowed. She stood and looked at the people in the room. Or is it that you all feel that it is natural and proper for the kitchen to slight me? After being swept over by Wang Fei's gaze, everybody shook and managed to respond. A few of the Taijian and the stronger mamas, 33, rushed to the forefront and acted as they were going to drag the kitchen servants away. The servants that were dragged away didn't dare struggle and only begged for mercy. One servant even yelled slander, proclaiming that what they had served Wang Fei was the best food from the kitchen. Flashing a look at the servant shouting slander, Chu Qingju's brow rose and she said quietly, "What are you standing around for? Drag them down, administer the punishment here. I want to see you carry it out." Upon hearing this, a quick-witted Taijian took out a handkerchief and stuffed it in that servant's mouth. He immediately started to drag the person towards the yard. The strength in his not-so-considerable body wasn't small. Seeing the situation, the others followed and dragged the others down. A few clever servants set up a table and chair before spreading out refreshments while waiting for Wang Fei to come see the punishment. "What is that Taijian called?" "I see that he has some strength," Chu Qingju asked Shu Kuei, who was supporting her as she stepped out. Answering Wang Fei, "That little Taijian is called Xiaogao Zi, 34, he sweeps the yard." Shu Kuei's voice held reverence that she wasn't even aware of, and even her movements were more subservient than in the past. "It doesn't look like he is very tall. Why don't we change his name to Huang Yang, to be an interior Taijian?" Chu Qingju smiled gently. When she walked out into the yard, the servants were already tied to the long benches and were under the long planks. Sitting down on the prepared chair, Chu Qingju mentally counted to 20. Then she slowly and calmly said, "Other than the one that talked back, stop on the other 3. Looking at the 3 who endured their pain as they knelt and thanked her, Chu Qingju raised her cup and took a sip. "A lot of people here are likely very confused as to why I punished you." The heavy sound of flesh under blunt force rang in the ears of the 3 kneeling. They didn't dare wipe the sweat on their foreheads as they kowtowed and said they didn't dare. "I'm a reasonable person, but it is just that you, as part of the kitchen, has become intolerable. I cannot do anything other than punish you." Setting down the cup in her hand, Chu Qingju's voice seemed slightly helpless. Even if Wang Fei didn't hold the favor of Wang Yi, she was still the Wang Fei that the emperor had personally decreed marriage on. Did a kitchen dare act intolerably to her? Even though everyone present felt something wrong, nobody dared argue. Didn't they see the person who had just been yelling slander was still getting a beating? Who in this Wang Fu doesn't know that I'm ill? The Tai, 35, had previously ordered what I shouldn't be eating. But look at what you have served every day. Chu Qingju gave a small sigh, her face full of sadness, almost as though she was a bullied stalk of little cabbage. 36. I know you cannot be bothered to treat an ill Wang Fei. I felt the same too, death was an end. But since I've recovered, I want to have a good life. You purposefully deliver oily foods, is it in hopes that I would get ill and die earlier? After finishing, she sighed in woe. If it wasn't that somebody was still enduring a beating, her look would have made others feel pity. The three servants started to kowtowing again, wanting to explain but didn't dare to. They were afraid Wang Fei would say disobedience against their Zhuzi and continue their beating. Seeing that the kowtowing had gone on long enough, Chu Qingju waved her hand weakly as though she had been severely wounded emotionally. That's fine, you can stop now and I'll leave. Finishing, she turned to Rui Xiang who was right behind her. Give some ointment to them. These people must be essential in this fu, we can't let them not attend to their vital duties. The four kneeling felt despair rise. Since Wang Fei said they were important and held vital duties, then tomorrow, even if they had to crawl, they had to be doing their jobs, unless they wanted to be thrown out of the fu. But they were servants that had signed a death contract, what good outcome would await them if they were thrown out? Finished ordering everything, Chu Qingju slowly stood and turned to look at the Ce Fei and Shurjia that had arrived at some unknown time. Her face made a surprised expression. When did you all arrive? Since you are here now, then come in. Done speaking, she didn't care to what their faces showed, she took Shu Kuei's hand and walked into her rooms. Chapter 2 Su Fei is still Chia. The Ce Fei and Shurjia didn't think that they would see a beautiful play of brute force once they stepped into the Jinyuan. They looked suspiciously at Wang Fei and then at the servants who were at their limits due to pain but didn't dare show it in their twisted expressions. What had happened here? Seeing that Wang Fei was walking into the room, the four didn't care whether if it was respectful or not and followed. Only Feng Ce Fei, when she passed, ordered for the people get carried back. However, when she saw that no servant in the surroundings moved, her expression changed and she didn't speak further. At the front, Yin Lu and Jin Zhan lowered their heads as they guided the others along and held the curtains open for the four. From far away, they saw Mu Jin and Yuzhan coming over with meal boxes. They stopped walking and waited for the two to come close. Seeing that those two weren't clear as to what had happened, the four exchanged glances and looked at the servants who had suddenly become more obedient in the yard before lifting the curtain to enter the rooms. The rooms had already been cleaned. The smell of meat had been covered by burning fragrance. But Qingju didn't like the smell and couldn't resist looking at the flying cane and golden beast brazier. Rui Xiang went forward immediately to extinguish the incense, changing it for a fainter, less fragrant one. Seeing Wang Fei's expression relax slightly, she breathed a sigh of relief as well. Look at how clever Wang Fei's yahuan is. No wonder that even Wang Yi complimented your yahuan, Feng Ce Fei said with a faint smile as she bowed slightly to Chu Qingju. She was laughing at the fact that a few days earlier, Wang Yi had taken one of Chu Qingju's yahuan as a tongfang. She dared to do so because of Wang Yi's favor but no one else dared to follow. Who knew that when she finished, Chu Qingju didn't even spare a look at her, as though she, a living breathing person, didn't even exist. The room settled into a heavy silence. Holding Shu Kuei's hand as she sat, Chu Qingju saw Mu Jin and Yuzhan entering with the meal boxes. She spoke, "Serve it up." The boxes were opened. Various types of porridge were displayed out. A bowl of lotus and lily porridge, a goblet of 8 treasures chicken soup, a few small vegetable dishes and desserts that were elegant yet light. Steam rose from each dish. Just one glance was enough to see how much effort had been put in. It looks like there are at least some that have skill in the kitchen. Give those that cooked a reward of 5 taels, 2 of silver each. Chu Qing-ju held a fine ceramic spoon and took a taste of porridge. She looked at Han Qing-he, who was standing to one side. She was one of the Shirjia and the Wang Fu. Her status was very low, but she was very good at being obedient. Even if she wasn't very favored, it wasn't that she wasn't favored at all. I heard that Wang Yi said you were very good at service, so today, you can serve the food. The porridge was passable and Chu Qing-ju's mood seemed to have lightened. Seeing Han Shi dawdling about, she wasn't irritated but asked in a slow voice, "Oh, Han Shirjia isn't willing?" "No, 3, doesn't dare." Han Shi's face showed a hint of humiliation. But the person in front of her was Wang Fei. She was only a Shirjia, and it was in the natural order that she was to serve Wang Fei. Even if she didn't want to, did she dare do otherwise? The other 3 looked in disbelief at Chu Qing-ju, who had lowered her head to drink porridge. Was Wang Fei crazy? Even though Han Shirjia wasn't very favored, but she had been with Wang Yi for a long time and was the one that had taught Wang Yi. Wang Fei, a not favored Wang Fei, really dared to order Han Shirjia to serve her food. Not caring what others were thinking, Chu Qing-ju blocked the chopstick of shepherd's purse, and pheasant Han Shi had picked up. "I don't like this dish. Remember to not serve this one next time." Han Shi's expression changed slightly, the hand that held the chopsticks tightened, but she didn't argue. In the end, she only woodenly bowed. "May Wang Fei have mercy." Nu has served Wang Yi for a long time, and assumed that Wang Fei would like the same dishes as Wang Yi. Nu thought wrong. This was telling her that she had seniority with Wang Yi. Chu Qing-ju smiled but didn't speak, turning her gaze to a dish of lettuce stems and pig stomach. Sometimes, silence was the greatest humiliation. Everybody could see that Wang Fei didn't even look properly at Han Shirjia, as though this woman wasn't different from any other Shirjia who had to hold curtains and serve food for the wife in other noble families. Chu Qing-ju took a long time to use her morning meal. Feng Fei and the others stood until their legs felt soft, but they never received a word to sit, so they could only stand at one side, and look upon Chu Qing-ju elegantly ordering Han Shirjia to serve her food. "Is there something Wang Fei has called us here for?" Seeing Chu Qing-ju finally setting down her chopstick, the Fei Feng Jin couldn't resist any longer. Her face still held a warm smile. Or did Wang Fei call us here just for conversation? Chu Qing-ju took the tea that Jin Zan held to rinse and used rose and lemon water to wash her hands. The smooth cotton fabric wiped away the droplets on her fingertips. Chu Qing-ju finally looked at Feng Jin. "I've always heard that Feng Fei's personality was as soft as water, but today I've seen that this rumor is true. Your personality just as rushed and impatient as boiling water is." Standing to the right of Feng Jin was Fei Jiang Yong-su, who upon hearing this, buried her head deeper to disguise the smile at the corner of her lips. This Feng Jin always loved using a warm and friendly facade to evoke the pity of Wang Yi, but Wang Fei purposefully said the exact opposite. It could be seen that Wang Fei didn't really have the personality of mud. It seems that this Wang Fei who had just entered the Wang Fu, had her own way of doing things. Seeing Chu Qing-ju laughing at her expense, Feng Jin felt anger rise, but the smile on her face became even warmer. Wang Fei is making a joke. Nu doesn't deserve such compliments. Wang Fei's open mind and innocent heart is what Nu and others admire. What Ben Wang Fei is like, the emperor already stated very clearly when the marriage was bestowed. Chu Qingju smiled as her gaze swept across Feng Zijin quickly, as though she was very surprised that a little Chia dared to discuss the behavior of a wife. The emperor's words are golden, his eyes are of a dragon, his pupils of a phoenix. He naturally sees more clearly than anybody else in this world. Anything that Feng Zijin wanted to say was blocked by these words. What could she say? Wang Fei had been handpicked personally by the emperor. She was only a little Chia, she couldn't say a word against the emperor. Even Wang Yi didn't dare say anything about that. As of the present, there were 4 imperial sons that had lived to adulthood. The emperor was reaching his 6th decade. The struggle for the throne hadn't floated to the surface, but underneath, it was already storms and clouds. No imperial son would want to throw dirty water on himself. Wang Fei dared to say something as audacious as this. It was clearly using the situation to her advantage. She was clearly relying on the fact that Wang Yi couldn't repudiate her, his wife. Thinking back to the words on the imperial decree of marriage, something like naturally outstanding, virtuous, and of good fortune. If the emperor declared Chu Qingju was virtuous and of good fortune, who dared say otherwise? Thinking there, the smile on Feng Zijin's face froze and she made a full bow. 5. Wang Fei, have mercy, Nu spoke wrongly. It is fine to say whatever in front of me, since once the door is closed, everybody is a member of Duan Wang Fu. But if you slip outside, if others say I cannot maintain discipline, it would be a minor matter, but if you shame Duan Wang Fu, it would be a different matter altogether. Chu Qingju sighed lightly. Technically, you have great seniority in this Wang Fu. I shouldn't need to say more, it has wasted my words. The fact that Wang Fei is concerned for us new, it is our honor, it is not wasted. Jiang Yongyu, who had been standing silently by one side the entire time, came forward and performed a bow. Nu may have spent more time in this Fu but is not as respected and valued as Wang Fei and not as knowledgeable. Wang Fei's attentions have taught Nu. The other 3 didn't think Jiang Yongyu would lower herself to such a respectful attitude. They felt disdain inside, but on the outside, their faces all showed looks of agreement. Feng Zijin looked once at Jiang Yongyu. Inside she thought disdainfully, it was obvious that she wasn't of high birth, that she would even curry favor with an unfavored Wang Fei. Taking in all of the expressions, Chu Qingju held her chin in one hand on the carved wooden armrest, her right index finger tapping on the chair. Of the 4 women in front of her, Feng Zijin's birth was the best. Her father was a 3rd-rank assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. Jiang Yongyu's father was only a 6th-rank official in the Ministry of Works. The other 2 Shijie was of even lower birth. Han Qinghe's father was only an 8th-rank official. It was only the fact that she taught Duan Wang on matters of adulthood that she was elevated to become a Shijie. The other silent and often ignored Shijie was Luo Yinxiu. Her father was deceased and she had, along with her mother, depended on the support of her maternal uncle who was a 7th-rank official in the Department of Transportation. Looking at the appearance, Feng Zijin was the most beautiful, followed by Jiang Yongyu. Similar to her name, Han Qinghe was very clean and Luo Yinxiu's appearance was just as unremarkable as her personality. These 4 simple-looking women and a few unable to be seen publicly Tongfang were enough to cause the original to be majorly ill. It could be seen that they weren't so simple after all. Naturally it would be good to remember, Chu Qingju stood, holding Mu Jin's hand as she started walking outside. The 4, seeing her movements, obediently followed to the yard. The yard had been cleaned, not showing any signs that would allow an observer to find that an hour ago, there had been people undergoing a beating. Squinting as she took a look at the sky, Chu Qingju then turned to look at the 4 women. Today's weather isn't bad, accompany me on a walk. After so many days ill, I didn't have the time to develop a relationship with you. We will remedy that bit by bit from now on. In any other Fu, when the wife was sick, which concubine didn't come to pay their respects? It was only the concubines in Duan Wang Fu that had the guts to only send presents but didn't come in person. The original endured, but she didn't have to continue. Listening to Wang Fei's warm voice saying words with a heavy undertone, Luo Yin-xiu, who had the least courage, couldn't help but shudder. She had originally thought to pay respects daily, but Feng Ce Fei didn't do so. She was only an unfavored shirtia and couldn't even say additional words, or walk an extra step. Now that Wang Fei wanted to settle old scores, Feng Ce Fei was fine with Wang Ye's favor, but she had no such favor. What could she do now? Jiang Yongyu, after hearing this, stopped and then looked at Feng Zijin. She didn't have Wang Ye's favor, but due to the fact she understood her position, her life in the Wang Fu could be considered not too good or too bad. Today, upon seeing Wang Fei, she peculiarly felt that Wang Fei had some element of power. The woman walking in front of her looked the same, but didn't have that personality of mud. The beating of the servants in the morning had been Wang Fei making an example, otherwise she wouldn't have made such a ruckus. Any nobleman with no problems in their brain would always give the wife some measure of respect, especially somebody as intelligent as Wang Yi. In the past, Wang Fei had been soft and didn't care to take up the issues, and so nothing had happened. Now that Wang Fei wanted to bother with it, nothing would be smoothed over just because Feng Zijin was favored. Wang Fei didn't have the attention and love of her father and stepmother at home, but she had an influential maternal family. Wang Yi wasn't a person without any ambition and naturally knew how to respect his wife. She looked sympathetically at Feng Zijin, who was walking in front of her once, then Jiang Yongyu shifted her gaze away. She saw that a procession that was making their way towards them. At the very front was the master of this fu, Duan Qin Wang. Chapter 3. Wang Yi. From very far away, He Hing, 1, had seen a procession of people in the garden, but it had been too far to see everybody clearly. The woman at the very front, he didn't see clearly, but from her movements, he could tell he was unfamiliar with her. Ming He, can you see who is it at the front? He had just left the royal court, and didn't want to spare the effort to deal with these women. After he spoke, he stopped in his steps, his expression of one who was fed up. Wang Yi, this one sees that it seems to be a procession of Feng Ce Fei and Jiang Ce Fei. Ming He opened his eyes wide for a look before quickly lowering his head. He might be an eunuch, but he didn't dare to look straight at his master's women. Then who is it at the front? He Hing squinted his eyes to look at the woman at the very front, doesn't look very familiar. Ming He quickly raised his head again. The woman walking at the very front had an extraordinary aura. He didn't know what flowers were embroidered on that wide-sleeved silk dress, but it seemed beautiful. For a while, he really didn't recognize who it was. He spoke hesitantly, maybe it's Wang Fei. Even Ming He himself didn't believe what he said, but other than Wang Fei, what woman in this food dared to walk in front of a Ce Fei? Hearing Ming He mention Wang Fei, He Hing remembered that woman with a soft personality. Her father was the Duke of Changde, her maternal uncle was the Xiangqing Marquis and also Supreme Justice of the court, too. Her birth was not in any way ordinary, but she was raised to have that kind of personality. No wonder when his Mufei, 3, chose Chu Shi, nobody tried to interfere. Chu Qingju saw from far away what the original in her memory had feared, Duan Wang. His appearance was that of a 20-year-old, tall and of good posture. He was wearing a white robe edged in black, with a white jade coronet, 4. The first impression one would get would be that of a giant among men, a dragon among humans. After they walked closer, she saw that there was a hint of a smile on Duan Wang's face, but there was no mirth in his eyes. Slightly bowing, Chu Qingju smiled and opened. Wang Yi has finished court, is there a need for nourishment? Wang Fei has recovered. He Heng's gaze landed on that porcelain wrist, the red of the phoenix blood rock contrasting with the pale skin so that the wrist looked as though it would break with a touch. Thanks to Wang Ye's good fortune, Chu Qingju smiled falsely, using a handkerchief to wipe at the inconspicuous sweat on her forehead. It is just that my body is weak and the Tai had already ordered me to a diet. Who knew that the kitchen servants would only pay lip service and send restricted and oily foods? I was so angry at the time, I pushed them with a bit of a beating. Jiang Yongyu, hearing Wang Fei mention this incident to Wang Yi, couldn't resist looking at Wang Yi. She saw that the other's expression was normal, obviously not placing any importance on this type of matter. It was true that He Hing didn't care for this type of incident, but he was a bit surprised that Wang Fei was actually able to order and carry out a punishment. Even though he held no good feelings towards Wang Fei, but it wasn't that he would embarrass her in this type of situation. To servants that won't serve faithfully, it wouldn't be a pity to throw them out. Wang Ye's consideration is the great fortune of Chia. If Wang Ye's personality was really what she hypothesized, he was a controlled and ambitious man. She lowered her eyes and face, not smiling at him any longer. In her past life, she was considered a successful manager. What type of man she hadn't seen before? This Wang Yi wasn't peerless in his beauty, she didn't care that much. He Hing saw that the other had no intentions of speaking further and turned to his other women. He saw that while Feng Shi's face had a smile, it seemed to hold traces of humiliation. He looked once at Wang Fei and saw she had lowered her head. At the end, he only nodded. Since you have gotten better, it is beneficial for you to exercise outside. Finishing, he left behind the crowd of women for his study. After He Hing left, Chu Qingju turned to look at Feng Zijin, her eyes slightly narrowed. She reached out with her right hand to lift a fine and glowing chin, and used a tone softer than silk. This face of Feng Fei, the more you look, the more you fall in love. Finishing, the thumb smoothed over the curve of the face until it felt Feng Fei shudder before retreating. She used her handkerchief to scrub gently at her thumb and index finger. That's fine, I'm tired. You can all leave now. Finishing, she held Jin Zhan's hand and turned to leave. Feng Zijin looked at the handkerchief that Wang Fei had thrown to the ground after she took 3 steps away, and her face, which usually held a warm smile, froze in anger. This was a great humiliation. What made her even more angry was that she had felt fear under Chu Qingju's gaze. What was Chu Qingju worth? How dumb and dull she was, that she dared treat her like this. At this moment she felt that the other 3 beside was having a laugh at her expense. She swept them, her face dark as she scolded. What are you looking at? Leave immediately. The 2 Shirchia quickly took a bow before leaving, but Jiang Yongyu, who was of the same rank as her, slowly opened her mouth and said, Mimi, 5, should return to your rooms early, I will leave first. Finishing, she didn't stay to look at Feng Zijin's expression as she turned and walked away. Chu Qingju. Feng Zijin, with a dark face, stomped a few times on the handkerchief on the ground before walking, full of rage, back to Shiyuan. Wang Fei, you really humiliated Feng Fei today. Jin Zhan felt satisfied yet worried. If Wang Yi knew, and blamed you, there's no need for worry. Chu Qingju laughed lightly, her gaze looking towards the study. Wang Yi isn't the average person. This type of man, he wouldn't care about small things. As long as she, as his Wang Fei, didn't do anything to damage the interests of Duan Wang, at this point, would respect her, as his Wang Fei. Even though Chang de Gongfu didn't care for her, but her Jojo, 6, was titled a marquis and was the supreme justice. Her Jomu's, 7, father was the Minister of Defense. The couple only had 2 sons and no daughters, and was very attentive to her, their niece. If it wasn't for those 2, how else would the original have protected her mother's dowry? Duan Wang might not need to depend on Wang Fei to accomplish things, but it was true he would never favor a Chia over a wife to create conflict with those people. At this time, every imperial son was restless and Duan Wang wasn't an unambitious person. She wasn't the type of person live in discomfort. If she really had to live in hardship and unpleasantness for her entire life, it would be better for her to just jump into a pond right now. As to how Duan Wang would treat her if he gained the throne, she was too lazy to think that much. Who knows what would happen in the future? Even if she was really virtuous and generous, it didn't appear that this Duan Wang would like her very much. Jin Zhan didn't understand the meaning in Wang Fei's words, but since Wang Fei didn't explain, she didn't dare ask. She, along with Mu Jin and the others, carefully walked Wang Fei back to Jingyuan and then saw the steward of the kitchen had been waiting for a long time. The moment the kitchen steward saw them, he immediately came up and took a formal bow and rushed into a list of explanations and requests for mercy. They were very misfortunate. In the past days, they had sent the same items to Wang Fei, but nobody knew that Wang Fei would pick today to erupt. If it was only that, then it wouldn't have been so major. But just now, even Ming He Gong Gong, 8, who served by Wang Ye's side, came by to berate them. The original steward was discharged. He had originally been the assistant steward and managed to take advantage of the gap to become the steward. He didn't dare overstep, so he had come very early to Jingyuan to make his apologies. Chu Qingju looked at this steward. He wasn't very tall and looked very simple and honest. He did seem very obedient, but to become a steward in this Wang Fu, nobody was honest. She was weary of his apologies and said, "What the kitchen is like, I don't care, but if in the future I find you are not attentive, you don't need to kneel here." The steward nodded frantically and handed over a menu, saying that it was for Wang Fei to pick the dishes for today and tomorrow morning. In the past, you have always said that everything was according to protocol, so it isn't possible to order. Chu Qingju didn't take the menu, only smiled at the steward. Upon hearing this, the steward immediately said, "It was probably one of the messengers that said it wrong." It is true that Wang Fei's food is mandated by the protocols, but it is possible to order dishes among the protocols. Finishing, he started to castigate the messenger for being dumb and misunderstanding. Chu Qingju didn't want to hear any more wasteful talk and said, "Fine, I know you will be attentive. Yin Liu, give me the menu." On the menu, once it reached her hand, there was all the ways of cooking, all kinds of dishes. She picked a few dishes that she liked and spoke, "In the morning, I don't like using oily or heavy foods. The kitchen can cook like normal, if it meets my preferences, naturally there will be rewards." The steward felt a heavy weight. Who knew what things suited this Wang Fei's appetite? His mouth kept repeating that Wang Fei was generous and compassionate and so on. Sending away the kitchen steward, Yin Lu massaged Chu Qingju's shoulders and said hatefully, "This pile of useless and spineless cowards." The pressure of Yin Lu's massage was perfect. Chu Qingju leaned back comfortably on the recliner. Hearing Yin Lu's remark, she smiled and said, "In this world, there are many people, but they are all this way. It is not worth it to be angry over a small insignificant steward." Mu Jin came in carrying with a goblet of date and honey tea. Hearing what Wang Fei said, she laughed and said, "Wang Fei is right, Nubi 9, thinks that from now on, there wouldn't be any more disobedient servants." Chu Qingju opened her eyes and sighed over those words. "In the past, I always thought the best of others, but it is today that I have decided to use goodness to repay goodness, use evil to repay evil. That is the way to live in the imperial family." Mu Jin smiled and placed the teacup on the redwood table. She pulled a thin blanket over Chu Qingju. If Wang Fei thinks like this, it is a good thing. In all the first-rank Yahuan, she was the oldest. In the beginning, when Furent, 10, had brought her and taken her into the Fu, the little mistress had only been a year old. Now, the little mistress has become a Wang Fei and she was over 2 decades. She had said very early on that she didn't wish to marry, her only desire to guard beside Wang Fei. Now that Wang Fei had changed, it was for the best. Chu Qingju looked at Mu Jin and thought back to the meaning of the flower Mu Jin. Resolve. This name was appropriate for this woman in front of her. It was one of the good things the original had, this Yahuan who always wanted the best for her. Closing her eyes, Chu Qingju didn't look at the sincere concern in the other's eyes. Mu Jin's wish, I understand. Mu Jin's eyes became red but she smiled and said, Wang Fei's words are embarrassing Nubi. Finishing, she covered her face and left. In the study, He Hing closed a missive and waited for it to dissolve in a bowl of water before saying to Ming He, don't touch what's happening in the south. De Ge 11, and San Di 12, is fighting very fiercely. It's better for me to watch from the sidelines. Ming He nodded. He saw the pieces of the missive dissolve in the bowl and turned to a new topic. Wang Yi, the people in the kitchen have been reprimanded. The new steward seems to be a smart one, he already went to Jinyuan to ask for mercy. He Hing nodded and didn't pay much attention, only saying, Chu Shi is Ben Wang's D13 wife. What she is due, she will receive. Thinking back to Chu Shi's vibrant new appearance that was contrary to the past plain one, his brow moved slightly. As to how Wang Fei does in the future, we will wait and see. Ming He nodded silently. This was between the Zhuzi and the female Zhuzi. He was a servant and naturally had no opinion. But he kept on sensing that today's Wang Fei was different from before. It wasn't just the change in wardrobe, even the gaze had changed. As the main steward of the Fu, he had seen Wang Fei a few times before. He kept on feeling that Wang Fei seemed to have from an unnoticeable gray bunny transformed to a fierce female fox. Recognizing he was guessing about his masters, Ming He buried his head deeper. Amitofo, he should be punished. Chapter 4 Embarrassment. A new day had arrived. The Ce Fei and Shijie of the Wangfu obediently came to the Jinyuan to pay their respects. The result was that they had waited for almost an hour but didn't manage to see Wang Fei's face. The other 3 were still alright, only sitting there woodenly. But Feng Zijin's face showed a hint of impatience. Even so, even she didn't dare turn and leave. Taking a drink of tea to suppress the impatience inside, Feng Zijin asked in a quiet voice to her Yahuan behind her, Chunyu, what time is it now? Chunyu looked outside. The sun had already risen. She could only say, Mistress, it's already past 9. Jiang Yongyu coldly observed the motions of Feng Zijin and her servant. She lowered her gaze to her lotus-colored dress as though she was an unfeeling piece of wood, waiting for Wang Fei to arrive. After another 15 minutes, they finally saw Wang Fei's first-ranked Yahuan Mu Jin slowly walk out, a face full of remorse. She bowed deeply to the 4, Su Fei and Yinyang, 1, please return. Wang Fei said that paying respects daily is a torment and that paying respects every 3 days would be enough. Wang Fei is considerate. They waited for the better part of the morning, but they only received these few words. The insides of these 4 present were complicated and varied but their expression was the same. As one of the Ce Fei and the senior one on top of that, Jiang Yongyu came up front and smiled, agreeing, then we wouldn't disturb Wang Fei any further. Wang Fei is very busy every day. If there had been a notice yesterday, there would be no need for a disturbance today. It was us that was rude. Feng Zijin smiled mirthlessly and followed with, I am a rough kind of person, very undisciplined. I'm never good at the fine details, so Wang Fei will have to forgive me. Listening to Feng Ce Fei's ambiguous words, Mu Jin's smile didn't waver and she bowed again. Feng Ce Fei has no need to worry. Wang Fei is always lenient and wouldn't be moved to anger over small things. The two pairs of eyes met. Mu Jin's gaze held laughter, a lowered chin giving the impression of respect. Feng Fei's smile gradually became colder and in the end, she only took her Yahuan Chenyu and Xia Yun and left. The other three were much more courteous and left the Jingyuan with smiles on their faces. Coming out of the Jingyuan, the three released a breath. Luo Yinxiu couldn't help but say, now Jingyuan's atmosphere has become frightening. Jiang Yongyu smiled but there was no mirth in her eyes, that one is Wang Fei. Whether I am favored or not, I cannot displease her. Han Qing he was the eldest among those four and had been the Yahuan arranged by the Department of Household Affairs to Wang Ye's side to teach him about adult matters. She didn't like what Jiang Yongyu said, but she couldn't help but agree on the inside. She had assumed that Wang Fei would get her to serve at breakfast again, but who knew that she made them leave without even showing up. If there is Wang Ye's favor, then it's fine. If there is no favor, she grimaced and looked back at the Jingyuan, will there be good days in the future? After these words came out, the three became silent. At present, none of them had children and nobody could be certain of the future. If Wang Fei wanted to torment them, only a few words could accomplish it. Inside the Jingyuan, Chu Qingju finished her ablutions and sat in front of the copper mirror, playing with a jade scepter. 2. Seeing Mu Jin coming in, she then lazily stood, holding Yin Lu's hand to sit down at the table in the outer room. She asked, were any of them unsatisfied? The others were fine, but Feng Fei said a few words. Mu Jin came front to serve her a few chopsticks of food. She smiled and said, Nubi wasn't too courteous to her, so when Feng Fei left, her face didn't look so good. Motioning for her to stop, Chu Qingju rinsed her mouth before speaking. That's a good way of dealing with it. People say that the gatekeeper of the Prime Minister is akin to a 7th-rank official. You are my 1st-rank Yahuan. Every action you take represents our Jingyuan. You can be courteous but you cannot be weak. Before, when I retreated a step, I didn't see any of them respect me one single bit. Hearing what Wang Fei said, Mu Jin understood that Wang Fei was putting her in the first spot. She became excited but kept her smile. Nubi will remember. Chu Qingju nodded and started to eat. After she put down the chopsticks, it was rinsing and washing again. After everything was put in its place, it was the beginning of a new day. Wang Fei, Nubi doesn't understand, why let the Zifei and Shijie pay respects every 3rd day? Yin Lu asked in bewilderment, not saying anything about other compounds, but even in Chang de Gong Fu, the G3 mistress had the Yin Yang come pay respects every day. What benefit do I get if they come every day? I wouldn't even be able to have a good breakfast. Chu Qingju held their hands to cross over the doorway. She looked at the spread of green in the yard and her mood lightened. I'm too lazy to wake up and prepare every day to wait for them to come pay their respects. Yin Lu nodded in understanding, carefully holding Wang Fei's hand as they walked into the yard. This yard wasn't small, it had the required elements of a false mountain, water, a bridge and blooming flowers. The servants were doing their duties but Yin Lu felt that this yard was too quiet. Wang Fei, do you want that little Taijian that you wanted to put into the interior yard come over and kowtow? Mu Jin saw Wang Fei stand on the bridge using fish feed to tease the fish in the water and spoke quietly, if there is no meeting, what is to be his duties? Dropping all of the feed in her grasp into the water and seeing a swarm of golden fish flash by, Chu Qingju smiled and said, let him come over. A short while later, she saw that Taijian whose name she had changed to Huang Yang kneeling in front of her. Chu Qingju examined him closely. His face was clean and seemed very obedient. She smiled suddenly, stand up. The Taijian in this yard need a leader. In the future, you will be in charge of these Taijian. As to what you need to do, you just have to understand inside. After her words, she saw this Huang Yang kneel down again to thank her. Chu Qingju looked once at Mu Jin. Mu Jin has served many years at my side. If there is anything you do not understand, you will ask her. Huang Yang confirmed and bowed to Mu Jin. Mu Jin returned the greeting and laughed. Wang Fei has selected you because you were obedient. You should try to live up to Wang Fei's hope. Please don't worry, Mu Jin Gunyang. Nu will be careful in service of Wang Fei. Huang Yang didn't say any superfluous words. It could be seen that Wang Fei didn't like listening to useless things. Seeing the situation, Mu Jin nodded inside. He didn't seem to be of any great use, but at least had a good eye for detail and wasn't so dumb. What Wang Fei had just said, it was to make declare that all the servants in the Niuan would be under her charge. She had no way of reciprocating except take note of every small thing and always putting Wang Fei first. Huang Yang hadn't thought that he would receive Wang Fei's attentions, and he was ecstatic on the inside. To say nothing of bowing to Mu Jin, if he had to kowtow a few times, he would do it willingly. After retreating, his face finally revealed his state of excitement. Turning his head back to look at Wang Fei on the bridge, he thought, who said Wang Fei was a wood-like person, he didn't think there was a woman in the Wang Fu that could outcompete Wang Fei Nyang. For, seeing Huang Yang retreat, Chu Qingju sighed and leaned in boredom on a post on the bridge. She suddenly heard a serene stream of flute music from far away. The sound was both full of worry and like the cries of a woman. She looked in the direction of the flute and asked suspiciously, "Why is there flute music at this time?" The faces of Mu Jin and the others changed slightly, but nobody spoke. Seeing the situation, Chu Qingju smiled and said, "Or is it that I am forbidden from knowing this? Wang Fei, over there is Cui Yu Yuan. 5. Supposedly, a Huakue, 6, that one of the officials gave to Wang Yi is living there." Mu Jin, seeing Wang Fei didn't seem affected, continued onwards. Nubi heard this Huakue called Yunqing is famous in the capital. She's skilled in the zither, go, calligraphy and painting. Wang Yi frequently visits her, but Yunqing Gunyang's personality is very virtuous, so she is still a Gunyang. The meaning was that Wang Yi hadn't managed to get a taste of this Huakue yet. Chu Qingju laughed and her interest in the flute halved. If she was really noble and virtuous, who would let another gift her into this Wang Fu and then put out this attitude? Seeing but not touching was an eternally successful skill of all beautiful women. She clapped her hands and then Chu Qingju held Yin Lu's hand. "Let's go elsewhere." They hadn't walked a few steps before seeing an unfamiliar little Taijian run over. Upon seeing Chu Qingju, he made a full bow. "Nukai Xiaogan Zi greets Wang Fei. Wang Yi has commanded Nukai to tell Wang Fei he is coming over to Jingyuan for the noon meal." Ben Wang Fei knows. It took a few seconds for Chu Qingju's brains to remember that this Xiaogan Zi was one of the frequently used Taijian of Duan Wang. She nodded to confirm her understanding. "Wang Yi has returned already?" Xiaogan Zi answered, "Back already, but hasn't entered the Fu yet when he met the Royal Highness Qing Wang, 7, so he let Nukai send a message. It will probably be a while before his return." It was like that then. The sounds of the flute Cui Yu Yuan, did they appear due to Duan Wang's presence? That time would have been the time that Duan Wang was returning. The flute sounds were too much of a coincidence. It was so sad that nobody was there to admire such beautiful sounds. Why didn't she go take some pleasure from it? Since Wang Yi wouldn't be returning very quickly, then let the kitchen prepare the noon meal. Somebody go to Cui Yu Yuan and inform them that Ben Wang Fei likes Yunqing Gunyang's flute and will visit shortly. Chu Qingju touched the butterflies in flight of the buyao in her hair and smiled happily. Xiao Ganji stood in shock for a beat before bowing and leaving, turning towards Cui Yu Yuan. Even though Wang Yi had some minor interest in that women living in Cui Yu Yuan, but as somebody who had served at Wang Ye's for many years, he understood that a small insignificant huakue wasn't as important as Wang Fei. Entering Cui Yu Yuan, he saw Yunqing Gunyang who was playing the flute under the grape trellis. He didn't pay attention to the others' music. Walking forward, Xiao Ganzi stated, Yunqing Gunyang, Wang Fei enjoyed your flute. In a short while, she will be deigned to arrive, so please prepare. The sounds of the flute instantly stopped. Yu Qing looked coldly at Xiao Ganzi and faintly said, My place here is much too small, it isn't worthy for Wang Fei to lower herself to come. Hearing this, Xiao Ganzi laughed strangely, Whether your place is good or not, I do not know, but it is an honor that Wang Fei wants to come. You only have to prepare. Or does Wang Fei have to report to you? Just a plaything, did she really think she was of importance? This entire Wang Fu, unless it was the few used by Wang Yi, who dared to talk back to him this way. She was just too shameless and ignorant. Yun Qin saw Xiao Ganzi sweep away, her youthful face turning colors, unspeakably grotesque. Chapter 5 I am a protector of beautiful women. Cui Yu Yuan was located in the west side of the Wang Fu. It was a bit out of the way, but the surroundings were neat and quiet. Chu Qingju held Mu Jin's hand as she traveled through a half-moon door and Cui Yu Yuan's entrance was in sight. The mamas guarding the door and the steward of Cui Yu Yuan had been waiting at the door. Seeing Chu Qingju, they quickly came up with smiles on their faces. The kitchen incident had already been spread to the entire Wang Fu. In a flash, no one dared to disobey Wang Fei. Didn't they see that even Wang Yi was on Wang Fei's side? They were only servants, who dared offend the Zhuzi. Nubi greets Wang Fei, the mama who was the steward came forward and made a full bow. She then looked fawningly at the first-ranked Yahuan, refreshments have been prepared inside, Wang Fei can come in and rest. I hope it didn't trouble you, Chu Qingju inclined her head slightly. Disregarding the ingratiating smiles on the gatekeeping and steward mamas, she walked gracefully into Cui Yu Yuan. Wang Fei clearly was very courteous to them, but the two mamas felt that Wang Fei was full of nobility and pushed their own attitudes lower. Cui Yu Yuan wasn't very big, but it was of high quality. Chu Qingju scanned the surroundings and at last, her gaze landed on the white-clad woman in the middle of the yard. Her hand holding a flute, the woman was very beautiful, wearing a wide-sleeved silk dress, almost as though she was untouched by mortal sins. She really didn't look like a huakue that came out of a prostitute house. This was the first time Yunqing met the Wang Fei that was rumored to be not favored by Wang Yi. She had thought that it would just be a normal woman, but who knew it was such an eye-catching woman. Phoenix eyes and brows like the willow. She had a Phaeacian hair arrangement, the jewel on the headpiece perfectly falling between her eyebrows, contrasting with the porcelain skin. She wore a wide-sleeved dress made of shoe brocade the color of moonlight. It was so fitting and beautiful that it appeared as though the dress was made to be worn by her. Just the two ornaments tied at her waist were more valuable than all the belongings she ever had. This was the rumored Duan Wang Fei. Yunqing's mind stopped and she strangely felt inconceivably inferior. The hand that held the flute tightened. She performed a soft bow. Yunqing greets Wang Fei Niang Niang. Yunqing Gunyang doesn't have to be too courteous. Holding Mu Jin's hand, she sat down at the carved mahogany table underneath the grape trellis. She took a sip of the tea that a little Yahuan presented. This tea is not bad. The water for this tea comes from the dew that I collect every morning. To be able to receive Wang Fei's compliments, it hasn't wasted my efforts. Wang Yi also likes this tea. Yunqing went forward 2 steps and smiled as she replied. Mu Jin heard how she addressed herself and frowned. She saw that Wang Fei's expression didn't change and her own expression recovered. The hand that held the cup stopped moving. Chu Qingju placed the cup down. She used her handkerchief to wipe the corner of her mouth. I think that Enchanting knows why Ben Wang Fei has come. I do not know if I have the luck to admire Enchanting's flute. She didn't have the interest to drink the dew of this flower or that grass. Who knew if it was clean or not? Wang Fei, I'm not one of this foo's musicians. Yunqing's face turned pale, as though she was humiliated, as she gazed at Chu Qingju. Yunqing's skill is poor. I don't dare let it enter Wang Fei Nyang's honorable ears. The moment the words came out, the entire yard suddenly quieted. One of the Yahuan that served Yunqing was frightened to the point of visibly shaking. She wanted to curl into a ball and didn't have the courage to even look in Chu Qingju's direction. Smiling at the other's attitude as though she would die rather than comply, Chu Qingju threw the handkerchief she used onto the table, her hand supporting her chin, one slender hand picking a fine piece of pastry. How dare you! Mu Jin's face darkened, just a huakue that somebody gave as a present to the Wang Fu. How dare you talk to Wang Fei in this manner? You really are something that came from such an unclean place, no sense of good behavior. Come, slap her mouth. Yuqing's eyes suddenly widened. She didn't believe that Wang Fei would act against her. Wasn't she afraid that Wang Yi would feel she wasn't virtuous? Before Yunqing could finish her thoughts, she felt pain appear like fire on the left of her face. The person who had slapped her was the steward mama that always fawned over her in the past. She covered her face and exclaimed in a trembling voice, "You dare, Yunqing." Sorry for the offense. The steward mama had a crying face as she gave Yuqing a few more slaps. Inside, she despaired. Today, she offended Yunqing and potentially enraged Wang Yi, but if she didn't offend Yunqing, she would definitely offend Wang Fei. She could only blame her bad luck to have been sent here to serve. Originally, she thought it would be a profitable position, but who knew that she would have to face the ugly truth. The beauty, after suffering the blows to the face, her originally beautiful visage became a sorry figure. Chu Qingju raised her head and her eyebrow rose. What are we doing? Ben Wang Fei is a protector of beautiful women. Yunqing Nuniang is virtuous and innocent, you cannot create difficulties for her. Finishing, she looked playfully at Mu Jin. Mu Jin, apologized to Yunqing Gunyang. In the past, I saw that Yin Lu was the impatient one, I didn't think you would learn from her. The people present lowered their heads silently. Hearing Wang Fei scold Mu Jin Gunyang, they couldn't help but think in their minds that this was slapping somebody and beating them into the ground before saying that they were not violent. With this kind of strategy, Wang Fei wasn't a wooden person. If she was made out of wood, it was the soft and flexible willow tree. She let somebody get beat up, and then made them have to rage against the wind for being too harsh, causing the willow to accidentally whip somebody. Mu Jin heard Chu Qingju's words and went forward a few steps. She stopped 5 paces away from Yunqing and bowed. Yunqing Gunyang, please forgive me. Nubi has offended you today. Yunqing pushed aside the old posy that was in front of her. She covered her face with one hand and stared hatefully at Chu Qingju. Mu Jin Gunyang is too serious. You are an important person of Wang Fei. Yunqing is a person of low status and doesn't dare blame you. Chu Qingju's index finger gently tapped on the tabletop. Hearing Yunqing's words, her eyebrow rose and she smiled. Wang Yi feels heavy affection towards Yunqing Gunyang. How can you not be less than Mu Jin as a little Yahuan? Finishing, she let servants bestow a healing salve. Seeing Yunqing behave as though she was humiliated, her smile grew wider. Since Yunqing Gunyang feels that Ben Wang Fei isn't worthy of hearing your flute, then we shan't speak of it further. The steward mama who had been pushed to one side let out a long heavy exhale. An ignorant thing, to act so in front of Wang Fei. Did she really believe she held a part of Wang Ye's heart? The Yahuan behind Yuqing's face grew paler and paler. After Chu Qingju spoke, she was scared enough to suddenly kneel with a loud bang. In this Wang Fu, Wang Fei was ranked the highest other than Wang Yi. The way that her mistress acted, it was clearly not respecting Wang Fei. Not saying that Wang Ye's attitude towards her mistress was only that of one treating a plaything, but even if he truly favored her mistress wouldn't have a good outcome today. Wang Fei have mercy, Wang Fei have mercy, the Yahuan continuously kowtowed. Yunqing Gunyang doesn't understand this Wang Fu's protocols, Wang Fei please have mercy. Jian Yun, what are you doing? Yunqing was covering her face but not one drop of tears fell down. She stubbornly widened her eyes, you didn't do anything wrong, why are you kneeling? Gunyang, please don't say any more. The Yahuan that was kneeling was called Jian Yun. She despaired inside. In the few days she had been sent to serve Yunqing Gunyang, she had sensed that the way Yunqing acted would create conflict in the Wang Fu. After feeling apprehensive for a few days, the conflict really came. Thinking of the situation, she could only heavily kowtow twice again and didn't speak anymore. Chu Qingju sighed. She saw that this Jian Yun was only 13 or 14. Maybe it was the fact that this Yahuan had stayed for a long time in this Wang Fu, that she saw more clearly than Yunqing did. She had no intentions of chastising this little Yahuan. She motioned for one of the Yahuan behind her to help this Jian Yun up. She had no more interest in looking at Yunqing's act of stubbornness and virtuous. She said to Mu Jin who was beside her, let's return. Since Yunqing Gunyang doesn't prefer this Wang Fu, then in the future this Chui Yu Yuan's allowance will be halved. Finishing, she pointed to Jian Yun, whose forehead was bleeding from the kowtowing, this Yahuan doesn't have to serve here. Ben Wang Fei sees that she looks proper, she can go serve in the tea room. Upon hearing this, Jian Yun lit up. She was now one of Wang Fei's people. Flooded with happiness, she started thanking profusely. This yard is very busy today. Hearing this familiar yet strange voice, Chu Qingju looked towards the door and saw Duan Wang come in with two Taijian. She had some impression of the two Taijian in Chu Qingju's memories. They were the ones that served Duan Wang directly, Ming He and Qian Chang Axan. They had much more status with Duan Wang than Xiao Ganzi. Chu Qingju opened her mouth and heard Yunqing cry tragically, Wang Yi. This Wang Yi was said in a soft voice, like a bird crying, like a bell ringing, yet it had 1 part affection, 2 parts anger, 3 parts grief and 4 parts stubbornness. It was enough to stimulate, upon hearing it, pity and tenderness. Her lips curled in a smile. This Yunqing lived up to being a famous Huakue. No wonder that official came up and gave her away. Normal people couldn't manage somebody of this skill. In her previous life, she had seen the truths and falsehoods of the entertainment circle. In one look, she knew what this icy and clean Yunqing Gunyang really thought. He heard Yunqing's call and looked briefly at her before moving his gaze towards Chu Qingju. Ben Wang heard Xiao Ganzi say Wang Fei was here enjoying music. Why is there no music? Yunqing realized that something was wrong, her expression changing to be even more pitiful as she looked at Hihing. Who knew that the other's gaze was still on Wang Fei and didn't look once at her. It is Chia's fault to not know ahead of time that Wang Yi would also come to listen. Chu Qingju walked to Hiheng's side and looked pityingly at Yunqing's slightly swollen face. What can remedy this? Hiheng finally looked at Yunqing's pitiful and sorry-looking face. He said callously, it's fine. In this state, there's no interest in admiring the music. Ben Wang should leave. Finishing, he looked at Chu Qingju's slight smile and felt that the other's buyao was swaying slightly, making his eyes itch. He added, after this, return earlier to Xingyuan. Ben Wang is still waiting to eat together with Wang Fei. Chia would never forget Wang Ye's words. Chu Qingju laughed lightly, the motion of her eyes seemed to carry magnetism, it should be Wang Yi that doesn't forget. He Hing couldn't resist reaching out to touch that trembling Buyao before smiling and leaving. Walking out of Cui Yu Yuan, he turned and looked back once at Cui Yu Yuan before saying to Qian Chang Xian and Ming He, Ben Wang remembers that there was a finely crafted golden won in-flight Buyao in the stores. Get somebody to deliver it to Jinyuan for Wang Fei to wear for her amusement. Qian Chang Xian and Ming He exchanged glances and quickly confirmed. They both were struck with realizations. In the past, they had only seen Wang Fei's soft and weak nature. Only today did they know that they had been wrong. Her actions was both cruel and deft. What they also didn't predict is that Wang Yi actually wasn't angry and seemed to be letting Wang Fei have a free hand in managing the Huiyuan. After He Hing left, Chu Qingju looked at Yun Qing, who had a gloomy expression. She smilingly held Mu Jin's hand and swept the yard before speaking. Ben Wang Fei said before, Ben Wang Fei is a reasonable person and a protector of beautiful women. Today, you didn't respect rank, which is a big mistake, but since beautiful women are rare, I will forgive you today. Finishing, she lazily blinked and looked at the steward mama. In the future, you have to be attentive in your duties at this Cui Yu Yuan. Even though Yunqing Gunyang's allowance is halved, but you cannot slight her. The steward mama replied in agreement, but after Wang Fei's procession left, the steward mama spat at Yunqing and declared loudly, why aren't you carefully serving our honorable Yunqing Gunyang back to her room? She is a goddess that even Wang Fei isn't worthy of her service. Us mere mortals must carefully serve her, in case Wang Yi punishes us. After the declaration, laughter rose in the surroundings. Wang Yi didn't even properly look at Yunqing earlier. What this steward mama said was really gouging at the heart. Chapter 6. The beautiful times of lunch. Coming out of Cui Yu Yuan, Chu Qingju raised her hand to touch the buyao in her hair and the corners of her lips lifted. She hadn't thought that this Duan Wang was interested in this aspect of a woman. That stare when he had been touched this buyao, she didn't dare look directly at it. This Wang Yi was to be pitied, he had to hide even this little fetish. Unaware that her Wang Fei had made Wang Yi into a little cabbage in the ground during winter, Yin Lu said, Wang Fei, Nubi doesn't understand, why move Jian Yun to Jingyuan? You dummy, how can you not understand such an easy thing? Mu Jin looked at the surroundings before saying lightly, that Jian Yun is one of Wang Fu's servants and wouldn't have much loyalty towards Yunqing. Today, Wang Fei moved Jian Yun to Jingyuan, tomorrow, other people will have the same idea. Water will flow to the lowest grounds, people will walk to the highest grounds. Who knows if there are people beside the other Chisher that want to walk higher. Yin Lu had a brief trance and was surprised at Mu Jin's understanding of Wang Fei's mind. She now understood a little bit at why Wang Fei put Mu Jin at the first position. She looked at Wang Fei and Mu Jin and realized for the first time that Wang Fei was different than in the past. The news that Wang Fei had disciplined that beautiful Huakue in Cui Yu Yuan had already spread. Chu Qingju hadn't reached Jingyuan, but on the way there she had encountered a few bowing Yahuan, and all of those Yahuan were in the service of other Ce Fei or Chisher. Just reaching the entrance to Jingyuan, Chu Qingju saw Yuzan and Jin Zhan standing at the door. Seeing her return, the two shows expressions of happiness as they moved forward. Wang Fei, Qian Chang Xian came over with others and delivered a lot of good stuff. He said it was what Wang Yi picked especially for you. Xian Chang Xian is still here, do you wish to meet him? Chu Qingju nodded and entered the outer room of the Jingyuan. She saw Qian Chang Xian and a few Taijin standing respectfully with eyes down. On the table in the room were a few moderately sized boxes and bolts of cloth. There seems to be a lot of stuff. Seeing Wang Fei enter, Qian Chang Xian bowed and said, Greetings to Wang Fei. These are what Wang Yi ordered Nukai to deliver to you. Wang Yi also said, if Wang Fei needs anything else, to just order the servants to do. Thank Wang Yi for me. Chu Qingju opened the box on the very top. Inside was a speckled blue-green jade sparrow hairpin. She smiled as she closed the box. Qian Gonggong had to make a special trip. It must have been such a bother. No bother, no bother, Qian Changxian quickly replied to the contrary, and with both hands presented a box with good fortune embossed on the top. This box, Wang Yi said, specifically ordered Nukai to present to Wang Fei in hopes that Wang Fei would like it. Mu Jin received the box and delivered it into Chu Qingju's hands. Chu Qingju opened the box, her eyebrows raising slightly. She took it out with her hand and the room instantly filled with sighs. It was a Luan Biao, but the craftsmanship was impeccable. A slight movement created the illusion that the bird was alive and in flight. Mu Jin stood the closest and was able to distinguish every line on the wand. The eye was an inlay of bright agate. Mu Jin was instantly dumbstruck. Such a beautiful buyao, even Chu Qingju was shocked into exclaiming. This was a masterpiece. Even in her previous life, she hadn't seen such an intricate piece. This was probably the legendary nobility of the imperial house. Chu Qingju smiled widely and looked at Qian Changxian. Thanks for your labors, Qian Gonggong. I really like this buyao. Ming He, who had just passed the entrance, saw this smile and thought inside that this smile was blinding. Even Feng Ci Fei and Yunqing Gunyang in comparison would be less vibrant. He couldn't resist looking at Wang Yi, who was walking in front of him, and wonder what Wang Yi thought. Liking it means that it has a use. He walked in front of Chu Qingju and took from her hand the buyao, personally replacing the buyao she had originally in her hair with the new one. The roomful of servants all lowered their heads. They couldn't gaze upon the intimacy of Wang Yi and Wang Fei. After Wang Yi spoke in admiration, then did they dared raise their heads. It suits you to perfection. He stepped back and looked at the buyao in the black strands. A satisfied expression appeared. Wang Fei's hair is as black as night and contrasts beautifully against this buyao. An embarrassed smile appeared on Chu Qingju's face. She lowered her head to avoid meeting He's gaze. She was a vain woman. She liked other people complimenting her. But this person in front of her that complimented her wasn't that simple. She didn't believe that this was purely a compliment. The two hadn't interacted together for long periods before, so after they sat down, they didn't have much to say. Thankfully, the presentation of food disrupted the silence between the two. The protocol was to not speak while eating, so when the two remained silent during eating, there wasn't an awkward atmosphere. Chu Qingju looked at He's eating and had to admit that this man in front of her had the most beautiful eating motion of all she had seen before. Those motions were much more soothing to the eye than the so-called higher nobility of her previous life. The supposed feast for the eyes was this situation. The state of He was enough to arouse the appetite of Chu Qingju, who couldn't resist adding another bowl of rice. But in the eyes of others, it became, of course, Wang Fei is definitely in love with Wang Yi. With Wang Yi here, she would even eat more. He hadn't thought that Chu Qingju would be so casual in his presence. In front of him, the other women in this fu would take small sips of soup, and quietly eat vegetables. When it came to Wang Fei, he kept on feeling strange with Wang Fei's gaze on him. After the meal was finished, Chu Qingju saw the Yahuan that knelt in front of her with a copper bowl raised high. She quickly washed her hands and let the other stand to the side. He looked at Chu Qingju before taking away his gaze. Now that Wang Fei has recovered, Ben Wang feels much less worried. In the future, you should manage this Hoyuan well. If you don't understand anything, don't worry. Qian Changxian and Ming He are the stewards of this fu. Any problems can be given to them. Taking the silk handkerchief that Mu Jin presented to wipe her hands, Chu Qingju said, these past days, Chia's body was constantly ill, and couldn't help Wang Yi manage the Hoyuan. Chia is embarrassed to face Wang Yi. Finishing, she looked at Qian Chongxing and Ming He who were in the corner. These two were very good at managing the big and little things. In the future, Chia wouldn't have much to worry about. Hearing Wang Fei's words, Qian Chongxian and Min He buried their heads deeper to express their humbleness and respect. Even if Wang Yi depended on them, Wang Fei was the true mistress of this Wang Fu. Wang Fei taking charge of Hoyuan was the natural order of things. What was the two of them? Putting the tea for rinsing to one side and wiping clean his mouth, He Hing saw Wang Fei, with a smile on her lips, lean back lazily on her chair. The corner of his own mouth rose. When they were in charge, this Hoyuan was a mess. In the future, you will have to spend effort. He lowered his face, looking at the green flowers on the teacup on the table as though he didn't place any importance on the women in the Hoyuan. You are Ben Wang Xing Fei, one, the others cannot compare to you. These words were probably a pretty impressive promise that a man of the imperial house would make to his big wife. Chu Qingju looked from the corner of her eye towards He Hing and at the same time, the other raised his head. Their eyes met and both allowed the smile on their own faces to become even more friendly, as though they were an old couple that had no visible flaws. Xia has no skill but can only make the best effort to help Wang Yi find a place to relax at home, if nothing else. Chu Qingju's smile became blinding. The trust that Wang Yi places in Xia is Qia's honor. He Hing looked at the bright smile of the woman in front of him and thought about her birth. She was a daughter of Chang de Gongfu, but soon after her birth mother passed away. The fact that the Duke of Changde liked his second wife had already spread through all of the city of Jing. It was rumored that the two had been involved even when the original wife had been pregnant and had been expressing his emotions through borrowing from the poems of Luo Xin. 2. He had actually used the poems of Luo Xin to name his daughters, which had been the subject of much admiration of many wives and girls in the city of Jing. Unfortunately, they all forgot the previous Duchess of Changde and her young daughter. Actually, his own Wang Fei's name came from that she wore shoes embroidered with delicate designs. What trailed behind was a garment as light as the mist. 3. He named the daughter born by his deceased wife using a name that represented the depth of love he had with his present wife. The Duke of Changde was either too in love or had no love, but what was certain that this daughter born by his previous wife was to be pitied. Thankfully, she had a reliable maternal family. Otherwise, it wouldn't be certain that she would have grown up. The He Heng which had grown up in the imperial family was very clear about those dark schemes. Wang Fei's personality after the marriage was dull. He hadn't been surprised. But these 2 days, he was very surprised at what Wang Fei had done. Was it that his Wang Fei in the past, living in Changde Gongfu, had suppressed herself in order to survive and was really showing her true self now that she was at Wangfu? Chu Qingju wasn't interested in what He Hing thought. She leaned back in the chair with a smile on her face, waiting for He Hing to speak first. This man wasn't simple. She didn't want to speak without preparation and make it difficult for herself. Wang Fei does not have to worry needlessly. You are Ben Wang's Wang Fei, your position is high. If the servants and the food do not perform well, then just discharge them. He Hing narrowed his eyes. My Duan Wang Fu will not tolerate servants who disobey. Yes, Chu Qingju smiled and turned to more minor topics. The two discussed for another 15 minutes before He Hing stood and said, You've just recovered, take a noon rest. I'll come back at night. Finding that He Hing had changed what he called himself from Ben Wang to I, Chu Qingju understood that this Dong Wang had at least respect for her. She stood as well and walked him towards the door. Seeing him gradually walk far away, she finally let go of the smile on her face. Mu Jin, standing behind her, saw her expression was calm and hesitated before speaking. Wang Fei, Wang Yi is coming over at night, is there anything to be done? Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. In this present situation, she wasn't as unreasonable as to not be willing to sleep in the same bed as Wang Yi. She used a handkerchief to wipe at the non-existent sweat on her forehead. Do what is needed, I'm going to rest. In 2 hours, serve me as I bathe. Seeing Wang Fei's expression was normal, a faint smile appeared on Mu Jin's face. Nubi will order the others to prepare. Nodding, Chu Qingju lowered her head and rubbed an ear. To be with somebody unfamiliar so quickly, there was just the slightest bit of embarrassment. Chapter 7 Chu Qingju. The news that Wang Yi was coming to Jinyuan was enough to make the servants cheerful. Everybody started the preparations needed, wanting to renovate the entire yard if possible. Chu Qingju actually became one of the calmest in the Hoyuan. Her hair hanging wet and loose, she allowed Jin Zhan to gently dry her hair, Yin Lu to manage her hands, Yuzan her feet and Mu Jin to pick her clothes and accessories. Wang Fei's feet are very beautiful, Yuzan sighed in admiration. Wang Fei's feet were pale, the toes round and tender to the touch. Half a beat later, she sighed again. The last time Ban Xia was performing an exotic dance, Wang Yi had praised her feet too. Nubi thinks that she can't compare to Wang Fei at all. What thing is she, that you compare her to Wang Fei? Mu Jin picked a red jade hairpin from a box. Hearing what Yuzan said, she snorted. She's just a lowly person, she doesn't deserve to be mentioned. Yuzan finally remembered that Ban Xia had originally been one of Wang Fei's servants. She had seduced Wang Yi to become a Tongfang and quickly added, Mu Jin Jijia, 1, don't be angry. I was just struck by how beautiful Wang Fei's feet were and my mind just didn't work. Hearing the protectiveness of the two Yahuan from their words, Chu Qingju couldn't resist laughing. From what you have said, if others could hear, they'll think your Wang Fei is a goddess. You can keep hearing it, I can't bear it. Finish and help me up, I can't hear any more. When this came out, all the servant girls laughed and felt relief inside. Evidently Wang Fei hadn't kept what happened with Ban Xia on her mind. Chu Qingju had a preference for wide-sleeve dresses and in the end, still picked a red wide-sleeve dress. The color of fire contrasted with the snowiness of her skin. Casually allowing Mu Jin to style her hair and use the red jade hairpin to secure it, she leaned back against her chair and flipped open a story about a scholar and a beauty. It wasn't that she had much interest in this type of story, it was just there wasn't many amusements in this time. After 2 pages, she couldn't muster the interest to read how the poor men in this time fantasized about rich ladies. Seeing the sky darkening, she let them present dinner. Wang Fei, Wang Yi hasn't arrived. If Wang Yi hadn't eaten when he arrives and you have, Mu Jin opened worriedly, if you are hungry, why don't I let the kitchen send over some porridge? It's already this late, Wang Yi wouldn't come here to eat dinner. Chu Qingju waved her hand, just send my orders, that's all. There was nothing exciting about that tasteless porridge. She didn't like waters and soups. When He Hing entered the Jinyuan, he saw a stream of Yahuan come out with empty meal boxes. Waving away their greetings, He Hing felt a bit complicated, a feeling of disappointment similar to, Wang Fei didn't wait for me to eat, my status doesn't seem to be very high. Entering the room, at first glance He Hing saw Wang Fei sitting at the round table washing her hands in preparation of eating. It was the red of the wide-sleeve dress that was too eye-catching, that he had to pay his attention immediately. He couldn't move his eyes away after a glance. This crimson-clad beautiful woman lazily wiping jade-like hands was his Wang Fei. Wang Ye's arrived. Chu Qingju set down the silk she had been wiping with and stood with a smile. Have you eaten? If not, let's eat together. Even though he had eaten, but feeling like he could still eat more, He Hing complied and sat. His gaze landed on the swaying strands beside Chu Qingju's face. It was only when Chu Qingju personally placed a bowl of pearl chicken soup in front of him that he spoke. Why is Wang Fei eating at this time? Chu Qingju jerked the corners of her lips. Wasn't hungry earlier, so this is a bit late. He Hing nodded and felt his heart heal. Even though Wang Fei was explaining it this way, but he still felt that Wang Fei was waiting for him to eat together. Feeling his ego was satisfied, Wang Yi took a drink of the soup, suddenly feeling that he was a bit too thirsty. After the meal, Chu Qingju proceeded as normal to wash her hands and drink tea to rinse. She found that the taste of tea today was much stronger than usual. Looking at He Heng, who was sitting opposite her, she realized the work of Jin Zan, who was crouched in front of her. After the table was clean, Hen Heng and Chu Qingju moved to the more comfortable armchairs and let somebody light the lamps. Other than the wedding night, I had never seen Wang Fei wear a red dress. He Heng smiled as he looked at Chu Qingju from head to toe, but this color suits Wang Fei. Chu Qingju smiled and saw Mu Jin and the others light the candles in the room. She used one hand to smooth the hair beside her face. They say that women use their appearance to please others. It must be that Xie is trying to please Wang Yi. He Heng's brow moved slightly. Standing and moving in front of Chu Qingju, he gently took that lock of hair. Wang Fei has definitely pleased me. Wang Fei has given me a great surprise these past 2 days. Chu Qingju raised her chin and smiled widely at He Heng. He. The servants in the surroundings saw the situation. Ming He and Mu Jin exchanged looks and the two waved their hands. Everybody else in the room quickly retreated. Ming He personally shut the door. Seeing Wang Fei's personal Yahuan was still standing to one side, he walked a few steps and she followed. He then lowered his voice to say, "Later we'll have to pay attention to see if the Zhuzi still have anything they need." This Wang Fei named her useful Yahuan using flowers. He remembered the most able of them was Mu Jin. Mu Jin nodded and replied in a low voice, "Ming He Gong Gong, don't worry." Who wasn't important in front of their Zhuzi. How to serve, Ming He wasn't the only one that understood. Ming He saw that she wasn't one for words and didn't speak further. Thinking back to how Wang Fei acted today, he wondered, this Wang Fei might not be anything when she doesn't move, but when she moves, it's a shock. Clearly, it was just a simple red dress and dark hair, but why did it have some inexplicable attraction? Rubbing strongly at his chin, Ming He stood quietly in the corner, paying attention to the movement inside the room, afraid that if he didn't catch his master's orders, somebody would steal his present position. Inside the room, He Heng and Chu Qingju's struggle had moved to the bed. Both were untidily attired now. One with strong vigor, one with bewitching eyes. There was only the last step. Wang Fei is so delicious, He Heng exhaled gently by Chu Qingju's ear, his voice becoming rougher. The tip of his tongue slid across the fine neck and was well satisfied to find the person below lightly shudder. Chu Qingju responded by winding around He Heng's neck with an arm, her foot lightly sliding over the top of He Heng's foot. Wang Yi is a feast for the eyes. Oh God, this man was very skilled at flirting. Ben Wang does want to let Wang Fei know who really is a feast. He Heng, whose appetite had been whetted by Wang Fei to a gaping hunger, pulled away the only covering over Chu Qingju's chest. Seeing that slightly moving chest, he felt that fire burning inside had never been as bright. He wanted to bite at this woman's chest, to leave behind on that pale skin a mark that belonged to him. At the moment, it was impossible to know who lit whose fire, but two mouths touched and that fire couldn't be suppressed any longer. It was a wildfire on the prairies, a sea of red waves, whipped higher by the spring winds to a peak. He Heng felt a never-experienced sense of rejuvenation. After the last tremors, he enclosed the soft woman in his embrace and laughed roughly. Wang Fei is my treasure. Even though it was said you couldn't believe anything a man said after, but this didn't affect Chu Qingju's good mood after being satisfied. She allowed this somewhat best quality man to hold her and yawned. Seeing that the woman was drowsy, He Heng raised his voice. Come, prepare water. Ming He, who had been waiting outside, waved his hand to others who had prepared a bathtub full of hot water to carry it in. He calculated the time. It had almost been 2 hours. He could see that Wang Yi and Wang Fei were full of emotions for each other. Lazily finishing her bath, Chu Qingju didn't care to dress and only wrapped a thin layer of silk around before walking to the bed. He looked at that bare jade-like feet, and that snowy legs and arms, and his eyes changed. He bent down to lift the person up and threw onto the bed. Then he covered her with a blanket and growled, "Wang Fei is trying to tempt Ben Wang." Chu Qingju laughed and one hand came out of the blanket. She curled her index finger, "This is tempting Wang Yi." Seeing her move like she was motioning for a pet, he couldn't resist. He pulled the blankets down and covered the other with his body again. Outside the door, Ming-He heard the sounds inside the room and stopped the servants that had been going in to carry out the bathtub. He couldn't help gazing at the moon. Didn't spring already pass? On the morning of the second day, Wang Yi left the door full of energy. The servants that served Wang Fei were still standing in their original spots. Hearing Wang Yi order the servants not to disturb Wang Fei's rest, Ming-He, who was following behind Wang Yi was worthy of his position. Inside the room, Chu Qingju slept for another hour before calling for servants. Mu Jin and Yin Lu, who had been waiting with a cadre of little Yahuan, silently moved in. Wang Fei, Mu Jin saw the marks that had appeared on Wang Fei's collarbone and moved her eyes away slightly. She quickly helped put on the underrobe and picked a trailing bird and flowers dress for Chu Qingju to wear. After Chu Qingju washed and sat in front of the mirror, Mu Jin finally spoke. "Wang Fei, today, Wang Yi had a good expression when he left this morning." Chu Qingju handed her a pair of tassels she picked and tried to let her face reveal an embarrassed blush. "You are talking nonsense. Go look to see the kitchen has delivered the meal." Mu Jin, seeing Wang Fei was embarrassed, smiled and said, all right. Nubi will go look. Jin Zhan, Yuzhan, serve carefully, Yin Lu and I will go. Yuzhan was the best hairdresser, so she usually did Wang Fei's hair. Coming of the room, Mu Jin and Yin Lu exchanged happy looks. Now Wang Fei finally managed to establish herself in this Wang Fu. Yin Lu smiled and said, "Next month is the Duke of Changde's birthday. When Wang Fei goes, let's see who dare overstep." Mu Jin, thinking about the unhappy mess of events and people in Changde Gong Fu, lost some of the cheerfulness on her face and sighed. As long as Wang Yi will always treat Wang Fei like he did in these last 2 days, nobody in Changde Gong Fu will dare not respect Wang Fei. As noble as Changde Gong Fu was, could it be as noble as the Wang Fu? Hopefully at that time, Wang Fei wouldn't go back to her dull personally and let the people in the Fu disrespect her. 1. Older sister /N. Chapter 8 Changde Gong Fu. It was another day for paying respects. The Ce Fei and Shijie arrived early to wait in the outer rooms of the Jingyuan. This time, their attitude was much more careful and they were much more courteous to the servants there. Jin Zhan, along with a few little Yahuan, came to pour tea for the women before standing silently to one side. Jin Zhan Gunyang, we came a bit early today. Did we disturb Wang Fei's rest? Feng Zijin's face was full of apology and looked towards the inner room. Wang Fei must be very busy these past days and exhausted. She had to be busy. Not just managing to gather all of Hoyuan into her hands, she also had the skill to let Wang Yi remain every night in her rooms. Wang Fei had some smarts. Feng Ce Fei exaggerates, Jin Zhan bowed, her brows containing humor. This Fu hasn't been very busy lately and Wang Yi also cares for Wang Fei, so there is no tiredness. Please don't worry, Feng Ce Fei, Wang Fei will arrive shortly. Feng Zijin didn't expect that her words would be rebutted. She paused slightly before saying, Wang Fei's good health, is the greatest fortune for us sisters. Chu Qingju had walked to the door when she heard what Pin Zijin said. She laughed as she entered. Feng Ce Fei's concern, I will remember. The four heard the laughter and simultaneously looked towards the doorway. They saw Chu Qingju, wearing a complicated and sweeping embroidered silver lawn and red clouds dress, walk in. That long dress trailed on the floor as though it was dragging on their hearts and inexplicably made them feel depressed. The women stood and bowed towards Chu Qingju. As they bowed, they saw the red-colored dress stream across their eyes. The beautiful tail of the lawn was painful to the eye. No need to be so courteous, sit already. Chu Qingju sat down at the front and waved for the others to sit down. She looked at the color of the sky and said with a touch of remorse, Today I woke up a bit late, sorry to let you wait. The others naturally didn't dare accept this apology. They only smiled and said they didn't wait long and then waited for Chu Qingju's next words. All of us here are Wang Ye's people. I don't have anything to say. You should all serve Wang Yi to the best of your abilities. Chu Qingju's left hand held a teacup, her right hand lifted the lid, not looking at the faces of those sitting below her. Wang Yi has placed the Hoyuan in my hands. I am not a harsh person, I just cannot stand those who do not follow protocol. If somebody breaks a rule, I don't need to care about any others, I only control the punishment. When the time comes, don't blame me, this Wang Fei, for not showing mercy. You can all do your best. They didn't expect Wang Fei to talk so plainly. Feng Zijin paused slightly. She felt that these words seemed to be targeted at her, but she couldn't say anything. Seeing the other three stand and express they would follow protocol, she also stood and weakly concurred. Since everybody understands, I don't have anything more to say. Setting down the teacup, Chu Qingju's expression lightened slightly. I heard Qian Chang Xian say that the Wang Fu received a shipment of fabric previously. Later, somebody will deliver them to your residences. The weather is getting colder, you should make some new clothes from the fabric. Concluding, her hand raised the teacup and motioned towards the outside. Everybody was perceptive enough to see and stood to leave. Coming out of Xingyuan, Feng Zijin snorted, using a few bolts of clothes to pretend to be a good person, it's like dispatching a beggar. Jiang Yongyu had been walking behind her and heard this complaint. Her steps slowed and the distance between them lengthened. After the women left, Chu Qingju stood and yawned, service now. She wasn't noble and virtuous. Even though she wouldn't be harsh without reason to other women, she couldn't act the part of virtuous. As to what Duan Wang thought, that was Duan Wang's problem. Shaking her wide sleeves, Chu Qingju smiled. This medieval clothing was both finely made and beautiful. After eating the noon meal alone, He Heng, as he wiped his hands, spoke. Ben Wang remembers that Chang de Gongfu has sent an invitation a few days earlier. The Duke of Changde's birthday. Ming He took the silk handkerchief from Wang Ye's hands. Yes, a few days before Chang de Gongfu did present an invitation. Other than our Fu, many in Jing also received one. But at the time, Wang Yi had just looked and threw the invitation to one side. Why was he mentioning it now? Ben Wang heard that Wang Fei also received Chang de Gongfu's invitation. He Heng's brows furrowed and his voice carried a hint of displeasure. This Chang de Gongfu is getting worse each successive generation, but their pageantry hasn't seemed to have gotten smaller as well. Ming He knew that this was Wang Yi was now dissatisfied with the Duke of Changde. He lowered his head as he retreated to one side. At the same time, Qian Chang Xian, who had been standing outside the door, walked inside. Wang Yi, a servant from Chuiyu Yuan, came to report that Yunqing Gunyang committed suicide. The person? He Heng asked coldly. Already rescued, but she couldn't breathe properly and fainted into sleep now. Qian Changshi swore in his heart, these women from the brothels obviously couldn't be seen in public. Suicide was easy, just wrap around the roof arch in the middle of the night and it was done. She had to pick this time to act like this. He didn't know if she really wanted to die or do something else. If there's nothing wrong, then let her stay there. Tell her if she still wants to die, then go back to her original place to die. Don't dirty my Duan Wang Fu's ground. Seeing Wang Yi push aside the teacup in front of him, Qian Chang Xian instantly understood. Wang Yi was tired of the woman's ritual of first cry, 2 make noise and 3 hang. Yun Qing could be considered abandoned, Nukai remembers. She was just a small actress, but she had to act like a virtuous person and also persisted in competing against Wang Fei. She had forgotten who she really was. She had the heart of a noble woman but the destiny of a Yahuan. It was self-inflicted. Since she wanted to die while living in Chuiyu Yuan, get her to move immediately to Qiu Yizhai. 1. He Hing stood and said in a fed-up manner, that place is peaceful. Ming he saw Qian Chang Xian hurriedly retreat, his brow rose and fell. With such poor schemes, she still wanted to stir Wang Ye's pity. It could be seen that this Huakue didn't live up to her reputation. Inside Jingyuan, Chu Qingju played with the invitation in her hands. The birthday banquet of the Duke of Changde. Whether she was willing or not, she had to at least go to that fu, even if it was just a formality. But just remembering the rage and dissatisfaction that existed in the original's memories of that place, her face became colder. In this kind of feudal era, there was nothing wrong with the dissolute nature of men in the eyes of society. But to marry somebody else when the body of the deceased person hadn't even cooled and to treat his own daughter as nothing, that meant his character was lacking. A man who couldn't even abide protocol during the 1 year after his wife had died, it was enough to make anybody feel extremely disappointed. Wang Fei, if you don't want to go, just order somebody to send the present. Mu Jin saw that Wang Fei's expression was strange and could only console her, no matter how noble that Chang de Gong Fu is, they aren't more noble than you. A Qin Wang Fei was nobler and higher ranked than Chang de Gong Fu, but the rumors wouldn't sound very good. Also, why would she let go of such a good opportunity? Under the absolute might of the imperial power, even if she was his daughter, the Duke of Changde still had to bow to her. This was a perfect opportunity to return in glory. If she didn't use it, wouldn't she be wasting her status as Duan Wang Fei? That's not necessary. My good father's birthday, this Duan Wang Fei, as his daughter, has to attend, lips rising upward in a smile. Chu Qingju threw the invitation to one side and saw Yin Lu walk in with anger on her face. Mu Jin placed the invitation in its proper place before asking, your face is green, who angered you? Nobody except that one in Chuiyu Yuan. There was a beautiful play right now. Yin Lu bowed slightly to Chu Qingju. Just now, Nubi heard that Chuiyu Yuan's Yun Qing tried to commit suicide. In her letter she wrote something like Chia originally was the snow on a high mountain but has now landed in a swamp. She was implying that there were people in this fu who treated her cruelly. She was blaming Wang Fei for not treating her well. Finished telling the story, Yin Lu had an even harder time controlling the anger in her voice. Awakue, she isn't some pure snow on a high mountain. Or does she mean no one is as noble as her? When the snow on a high mountain melts, what is revealed is dirt. She loves to be the snow that is white on the outside and disguises a dirty inside. Who wants to argue otherwise? Mu Jin snorted coldly and immediately said, what did Wang Yi say? Take care to not let anybody ruin Wang Fei's reputation. Mu Jin Jijia, you don't have to worry about that. When the news spread earlier, Wang Yi reprimanded that person for needlessly dirtying the ground of Duan Wang Fu and ordered her to move to Qiu Yizhai. Speaking of this, she felt her rage lessen, that Qiu Yizhai isn't a good place. A beauty will become a wild person. You can see that Wang Yi is really dissatisfied with her. Wang Fei has no need be angry over such a person. Chu Qingju finished listening to Yin Lu's speech, laughed, and said, "I'm not angry, but you blew your top." She motioned for Mu Jin to pour a cup of tea for Yin Lu to moisten her throat. "The Yun Qing was never somebody that deserved any attention. I have no reason to become angry over her. This Yun Qing wasn't a smart woman. If she had been perceptive, acted well-behaved all the time, she would still have some influence with Duan Wang. But she had to pretend to be virtuous, which was the worst strategy. Perhaps normal customers had liked Yun Qing's virtuous and innocent act that fulfilled the desires of the masses, but who was he Hing? He was Duan Qin Wang of this entire De Long dynasty. What kind of women hasn't he seen before? The schemes Yun Qing used, they only worked as long as He Heng was willing to play along. Send somebody to reply to Chang de Gong Fu's invitation. Tell them that on the day of the banquet, I will go personally to congratulate my father. Chu Qingju pursed her lips in a smile. She was looking forward a bit now towards the upcoming banquet of the Duke of Changde. There wasn't much entertainment in this era. She had to find something to do in order to not waste the time available. Soon after, the Duchess of Changde personally received the messenger mama of Duan Wang Fu and was informed that Duan Wang Fei would be coming that day to attend the birthday banquet. After the messenger mama left, the Duchess of Changde, Liang Shi, sneered, commenting, "I've heard before that the Yadu, too, wasn't favored by Wang Yi." Today, that messenger mama acted as though Wang Fei was of some importance. I didn't think that a person that dull knew how to pretend. Sitting by her side was Chu Yu Su, who sighed and said, "Tai Tai, 3, Jijia has already married. Whether or not Wang Yi favors her, she is still Duan Wang Fei." Liang Shi looked at her daughter that was as pretty as flowers and jade and understood the meaning in her daughter's words. She lowered her face and spoke coldly, "No matter what she is, she would not be as important as you in the future." Upon hearing this, Chu Yu Su smiled faintly and didn't speak again. Chapter 9. Valued guests. It had already entered autumn and the weather had gradually become colder. All over Chang de Gong Fu was an atmosphere of cheer as a variety of carriages parked inside. The gatekeepers had bowed to the point their waists couldn't straighten but kept smiles on their faces to welcome people inside the main gates. At Ermine, the Changde Duke's only son and his nephew through his wife enthusiastically welcomed the coming guests. The two were still very young and received compliments of being promising youths. In the recent years, Chang de Gong Fu had declined further and further, but nothing could beat the fact that they gave birth to a good daughter that married Duan Wang to become a Wang Fei. No matter what they though inside, they still had to do all the formalities. If they didn't act on behalf of the monk, they still had to respect the Buddha. All of them still had to respect Duan Wang. Thankfully, this Chang de Gong Fu was Duan Wang's in-laws, so the benefits of coming in person and giving presents were higher than the cost. The Duke of Changde's fortunes are as good as the North Sea is deep. The one that spoke was the Marquis of Baorong. He was only a middling character in the city of Jing, but the Duke of Changde didn't dare offend him and came up to greet him. "It's nothing, nothing. Thanks, Marquis, for coming all this way." The Duke took the other's hand as they walked towards the main hall. The other didn't remain courteous, and as they walked, he said, "Today is your birthday. I wonder when will Duan Wang Yi arrive? When the time comes, I will have to rely on the Duke to introduce me to Wang Yi." When the Duke of Changde heard this, he didn't feel so good inside. The message that Duan Wang Fu returned said clearly that Wang Fei will come, but as to whether Wang Yi would come or not, that wasn't confirmed. The words of the Marquis of Baorong stirred irritation in the Duke of Changde's heart at his married daughter for not having any skill at conquering Wang Ye's heart and forcing him to feel so awkward. Of course, the Duke smiled as he ushered the other person into the room to disguise his awkwardness. The Marquis of Baorong smiled and said, "Since the Duke is busy, I'll walk myself in, no need to be so courteous." Finishing, he entered the hall. Inside, he really was mocking the Duke. Maybe others didn't know, but he was clear. That daughter that the Chu family married into Duan Wangfu wasn't liked one iota by Wang Yi. It would be a strange thing indeed if Wang Yi did come participate in the Duke of Changda's birthday banquet. Did he think that if his daughter was a Wang Fei, he was a relative of the imperial family? Pa. In the gardens of Niuan, Liang Shi was receiving the womenfolk. Seeing that this year was busier than last year, Liang Shi felt conflicted. In past years, these people only sent presents but didn't come personally. Today, they all had the spare time. It was all because that Chu Qing Chu became a Wang Fei. These people were still scorning her for not treating Chu Qing Ju well, as though if they said it, they were much more noble. The way I see it, Furen really is lucky. The eldest daughter is Duan Wang Fei, and this third daughter looks like a flower. The Marquis of Baorong stopped and looked meaningfully at the Shu, second daughter of Changde Gongfu that was standing in the corner. Gunyang is also a paragon. This type of good fortune is something we can't even touch. Wang Furen, don't compliment these Yadu anymore. Liang Shi's smile was slightly cold. These wild girls, they can't compare to your Fu's ladies. This entire Jing, who didn't know that the Marquis of Baorong's eldest daughter wanted to marry a poor scholar to the point of death, but now she was coming back to her home every few days to beg for money. Who knew that the Marquis of Baorong seemed to be unaffected by Liang Shi's words and only replied, "No, no." The others indifferently watched the twos fight with tongues. The fact that conflict existed between the Marquis of Baorong and the Duchess of Changde had started in their childhood. Now that they were married, they still allowed others to watch the spectacle they made. A few that had known the two back when they were younger still remembered when Wang Shi had married the Marquis of Baorong. Liang Shi had been angered to the point of not attending any gatherings for girls in the city for the better half of a year. It wasn't until Liang Shi had married the Duke of Changde, whose status wasn't below that of the Marquis of Baorong, that she started to compete with Wang Shi again. Some looked down at Wang Shi's frivolous attitude, but they disliked the way Liang Shi acted even more, so they didn't speak through the entire incident. But this finalized their decision to not take any young girls anymore to Baorong Hofu and Changde Gongfu. At this time, not far away from Changde Gongfu, the entourage of Duan Wang Fei slowly neared. The other officials that came to attend, once they saw Duan Wang Fu's procession, quickly moved to one side and waited for the people of the Wang Fu to pass before resuming their own journey. Why did the carriage stop? A first-rank Furen, feeling the carriage she sat in stop, asked in confusion. She hadn't wanted to come to Changde Gongfu. Now that the carriage had to stop, her desire decreased even more. An old mama came inside the carriage and said in a low tone, "Furen, Duan Wang Fu's people are coming up from behind. Everybody is making way." Hearing that it was Duan Wang Fu, the dissatisfaction that the Furen had instantly disappeared. She peeked outside through the gap in the curtains. She saw the guards forming a path, for date-red horses pulling a grand carriage slowly passing, and then there was two relatively more normal two-horse carriages passing. Following that was handsomely dressed servants and Taijian. Even if it wasn't ostentatious, it was possible to see at a glance that this was the grandeur of the imperial family. That seems to be Duan Wang Ye's carriage. The Furen of a court official felt lucky. Lucky that she had come in person today. Otherwise, if Wang Yi arrived but her family only sent over a gift, wasn't that offending the imperial family? No matter which Wang Yi sat on that throne in the future, the honor of the imperial family couldn't be impinged upon by her kind of people. The gatekeeper saw Duan Wang Fu's carriage coming from far away and turned to run into Ermin to tell the Duke. The Duke had been exchanged pleasantries with another when he saw a manservant quickly run over and say that Wang Ye's carriage had arrived. The other that had been talking perceptively expressed he didn't need any special care from the Duke of Changde. He saw the Duke of Changde hurriedly walk towards the outside and walked into the inner hall, his mind whirling. Inside the large carriage, Chu Qingju sat beside He Hing. She looked at the calm expression of He Hing and opened, "We're probably getting close to Changde Gong Fu now. Wang Fei is missing her home." He Hing didn't want to come at first, but thinking about the treatment that Wang Fei had received before her marriage, he strangely wanted to come. Seeing that Wang Fei had a calm and steady voice, he couldn't help but tease, "It is my fault that I am not a good husband, that Wang Fei misses her father." "Wang Yi, don't laugh at Xia anymore," Chu Qingju glared at He Hing. Early in the morning, this Wang Yi, with his strange personality, had let the servants deliver a variety of jewelry and said for her to pick whatever she wanted to and wear whatever. She had looked at the multitude of boxes, each containing a small fortune in jewelry, and assumed that this Wang Yi was going to open a jewelry shop. After she finally managed to dress in her finery, this person had came out of nowhere in his moonlight-colored with embroidered gold clouds robes, saying that he was going to accompany her to Changde Gong Fu. Seeing the fact that he had dressed very handsomely, Chu Qingju had laughed and followed him onto the carriage. Who knew that he was saying strange things now? Xia is married to Wang Yi, Duan Wang Fu is home. Wang Yi saying otherwise, is it due to disliking Xia for not doing well? Chu Qingju tilted her head and created the expression she didn't want to pay attention. Upon hearing this, the smile on He Heng's face became more visible. He reached out his hand to grasp Chu Qingju's hand. "Don't be angry. If you are angry, the one who feels regret is me." Finishing, his face became more serious. "Some things, I know. You don't have to worry." Chu Qingju turned her head towards He Heng. Seeing the other smile like usual, she didn't understand the reasoning behind him saying those words, so she smiled and said, "Wang Ye's affections for Xia understands in her heart." If she really believed, it would be a tragedy. "Wang Yi, Wang Fei, we've arrived at Changde Gong Fu." The carriage slowly stopped and Qian Chang Xan's voice came from the outside. This lowly official greets Wang Yi, Wang Fei. The Duke of Changde saw the carriage stop and quickly came forward with others to bow. "Today is the Duke of Changde's birthday. Ben Wang has come to celebrate. There's no need for such formalities." Qian Chang Xan heard Wang Yi make a sound before coming up to raise the curtain for Wang Yi and kneel down for Wang Yi to step on his back to exit. Chu Qingju put on a veil. When she came out of the carriage, she saw a hand appear in front of her. She looked at the smiling visage of the owner of that hand. Then she lowered her head slightly to hold He Heng's hand to get down from the carriage. At the side, the sedan had been prepared already. Mu Jin lifted the sedan screen for Chu Qingju to enter. Putting down the screen, she bowed slightly to Wang Yi and then, along with the other first-ranked Yadu, sat on the little sedans behind. Seeing that Duan Wang had come personally to celebrate his birthday, the joy that the Duke of Changde overflowed. Seeing the attitude that Wang Yi held towards his daughter, his face broke into a smile and he ushered He Heng from the front entrance inside. When Duan Wang entered the doors, the heavy labor mamas that carried the sedan raised the sedan and entered as well. But the direction they went was different than Duan Wang. They were going towards the garden in the back. He Heng allowed the Duke of Changde to escort him towards the inner hall. He saw two youths that weren't yet 15 follow behind and asked, "This two are?" "Wang Yi, this is my son Chu Wangji and wife's sibling son, Liang Rong." Seeing Wang Yi pay attention to his son, the Duke of Changde joyously said, "Quickly come greet Wang Yi." The two people bowed again. He Heng calmly excused the two from their bow. "What books have the two read?" "My son is very disappointing, he is still studying in the Dongshan College. My wife's sibling son became a Xiuzai, too, last year." The Duke of Changde saw that Wang Ye's tone was calm, and didn't dare to exaggerate, only telling the truth. This Duan Wang was only about 20 years old, but he just wasn't someone that could be overlooked. The Duke of Changde felt rueful, he was definitely an imperial son. This young man is the Duke's only son. He is still young, the Duke shouldn't put too much pressure. He nodded. Ben Wang has heard of Dongshan College, many famous scholars have come from there. Ben Wang heard that your foreign had the rare dragon and phoenix twins that year. This young man will be accomplished in the future. No, Wang Yi is too complimentary. As a father, he naturally liked others compliment his son. Additionally, Wang Ji and Yu Su were a pair of dragon and phoenix twins which was rare in Jing capital. That had been the subject of much pride for many years. But at this time, he didn't see the iciness in He Heng's eyes. Chu Wangji, who had been walking at the back, heard the discussion between the two men. Thinking of his mother's dislike towards his eldest sister, he couldn't help but think, now that eldest sister was a Wang Fei, would she purposefully take revenge against them? If it was third sister that became Wang Fei, it was much better. Mother wouldn't have to be angry over eldest sister. In the gardens, Liang Shi and the Marquis of Baorong finished their duel of words and heard a Yahuan hurried walked inside. Foreign, Duan Wang Fei has arrived. The people present were not as highly ranked as Duan Wang Fei. Hearing the announcement, they all stood. As much as Liang Shi didn't wish to, she still had to stand and wait by the door of Hanging Flowers, 3, to receive. When she had walked to the door of Hanging Flowers, she saw a sedan made of fragrant wood with inlaid jewels stop by the door. Before the sedan could be lowered, a host of Mama and Yahuan crowded around, their expressions full of cautiousness and reverence. She smiled coldly. It was really a pheasant become a phoenix. Even her behavior had become outrageous. Chapter 10 Displays of Affection. The dark screen of the sedan was lifted and a pale hand reached out to land on the hand of Mujin, who had bent down beside the door of the sedan. After that, a foot that was wearing a slipper inlaid with precious stones and gold embroidery stepped out. Then there was a flash of a dress that moved like waves of water. Liang Shi looked at the woman who walked out of the sedan. The smile on her face didn't get smaller but the curve of her mouth froze. The Chu Qingju that stood in front of her eyes, compared with the one that had returned home 3 days after the marriage, was drastically different. Following behind her was Chu Yu Su, who saw that her mother's actions were not proper. She smiled and walked towards Chu Qingju. She bowed slightly and cordially said, "Jijia finally came. Tai Tai and I have been eagerly waiting." Chu Qingju heard those words as she walked towards Liang Shi and said, "Originally, the preparations had started early, but Wang Yi wanted to come with me, so it took a bit longer." As she spoke, her person had walked in front of Liang Shi. She slightly bent her body, "To let Tai Tai wait so long, it is my fault." It didn't matter how much Liang Shi didn't like Chu Qingju, but in front of so many people, she couldn't accept that slight bend of the body. She quickly grasped Chu Qingju's hand and bowed in return before saying, "Wang Fei is busy with matters in the Fu, and to be able to come so early, it is the filial love you hold for Lao Yi." Don't say such things." Everybody had been waiting to greet Wang Fei had come close and heard those words. They quickly followed in complimenting Chu Qingju. Not taking into account whether Duan Wang Fei was favored or not, but just the importance that the entire family of the Marquis of Xiangqing put on was enough to let them put importance on Duan Wang Fei. Moreover, looking at Duan Wang Fei's attire and the fact that Duan Wang had personally accompanied her, it was enough to declare Duan Wang Fei's place in Duan Wang's heart. After Chu Qingju rejected the invitation to sit at the front, Liang Shi didn't persist. No matter how honorable and high-ranked Duan Wang Fei was, according to their social relationship, she was her mother. If she sat at the front, it was not wrong. The bystanders saw what Liang Shi had done and laughed inside at her stupidity. Technically, Duan Wang Fei did have to call her mother, but right now she was one of the imperial family. "You're putting on the act of being the mistress of the household, but did you ever think that this would enrage Wang Yi, and disadvantage her husband and children. Duan Wang Fei might respect you for being her mother in name. Did you expect an imperial son to give you that respect? Whoever you were always a fraction lower in front of members of the imperial family. Not to mention she was only the stepmother. No wonder that the declining Liang family had been so happy when their daughter became the second wife of the Duke of Changde. With this kind of brains and upraising, she had made a match above her station. Chu Qingju sat down at the highest place on the left side. She took a drink of tea before setting down the cup and turning to exchange chatter with the other Furen. Wang Fei's appearance looks much better. The one speaking was the wife of the Minister of Defense, Luo Furen. She was also Chu Qingju's Jomu's mother. This old Furen had paid attention to Chu Qingju, and so nobody was surprised by the intimate tone. This old one had remembered when it was time to add to Wang Fei's dowry. Wang Fei had been small and thin. It's just been a few months, but this old one almost couldn't recognize. You can see that Duan Wang Fu takes good care of people. That is so true, not just Luo Tai Tai. I almost couldn't recognize her too. Tianshi took over speaking. She was Chu Qingju's mother's younger Shu sister. Even if she hadn't been considered close with Chu Qingju's mother, but emotionally, she still leaned towards Chu Qingju. Additionally, Chu Qingju was now Duan Wang Fei, so her following words wasn't very polite. I had seen the other two girls of this Fu are as beautiful as a flower and had been worried for a long time for this niece. All the daughters of Chang de Gong Fu are beautiful. Everybody present knew that this was criticizing Liang Shi for harshly treating the original wife's daughter. The words were nasty but honest. They saw that Duan Wang Fei was still smiling but not speaking and instantly understood this Duan Wang Fei's attitude towards Liang Shi. That year, Liang Shi used schemes to seduce the Duke of Changde to the point of insanity, and caused the pregnant Tianshi to give birth to a daughter before passing away due to illness. And not just 2 months after Tianshi had died, Liang Shi had married in. After that, when Xiang Qing Hofu wanted de Gunyang to stay at the Hofu for short periods of time, it was frequently blocked by Liang Shi. In the end, Xiang Qing Hofu was in constant conflict over everything with Chang de Gong Fu. The most pitiful was de Gunyang. If it wasn't that she had the protection of Xiang Qing Hofu, she probably couldn't have anything left of her mother's dowry. When she did such a terrible thing, it became hard to blame Duan Wang Fei for making things difficult. It was only the Duke of Changde that considered such a poisonous woman a treasure. If it was a respectable family, they would be embarrassed to have her, even as a chia. Chu Qingju apathetically watched as everyone laughed at Liang Shi using their words and actions. She pretended to not understand, smiled, and didn't speak. The state of Chang de Gong Fu at present, it was an empty scaffold. It was possible to see it from the attitudes of these Furen towards Liang Shi. The fact that she would be picked by the emperor to marry Duan Wang, it was a trick that she didn't know which consort in the imperial palace had thought up. Chu Qingju was pitiful as she was alone and became a sacrifice to the political machinations of others. If she didn't have a good Jojo, before she could appear here, her corpse would have already disappeared. The apathy of men, the resulting pain would be multiplied on the women. The weakness of women, the resulting pain would be multiplied on the children. But this kind of era, it couldn't accept too strong of a woman. Everything about de Gunyang is good, but she's just too dull. Now that Wang Yi treats her well, as her mother, has no more worries. Hearing this, Chu Qingju raised her head to look at Liang Shi. This wasn't a simple woman. So many people laughing at her, but the expression on her face never changed. Touching the golden phoenix and agate buyao as though nothing had occurred, Chu Qingju jerked the corners of her lips. Tai Tai doesn't have to worry for this daughter. In Duan Wang Fu, I am living very, very well. The care that Tai Tai has given this daughter over the years, I am clear in my heart. Finishing, she acted as she just remembered something. Speaking of that, Didi and San Mei's ages aren't so young anymore. I've brought some presents today. It isn't anything valuable, so I'll leave it for everybody to play with. She didn't know why Chu Qingju specifically mentioned Wang Ji and Yu Su, but Liang Shi understood she hadn't treated Chu Qingju well in the past. Saying such things today, it wasn't out of goodwill. We don't deserve Wang Fei spending the money. Liang Shi forced a smile. Looking at the agate earrings on Chu Qingju's ears, she clearly realized for the first time that Hor Tianshi's daughter had become a Wang Fei. Tai Tai doesn't have to be so courteous, we are all one family. Chu Qingju lowered her head, raising the teacup and blowing slowly, but there was no interest in taking another sip. Everybody looked upon this motion and suddenly felt that even though Duan Wang Fei's words were all polite and courteous, but what people could sense was an aura that was imposing, as though Liang Shi was nothing but a joke in her eyes. As though it was only due to her compassion and generosity that she didn't argue with her. Chu Yu Su looked at the Chu Qingju in front of her. Her brows furrowed. The person was still the person, just that the makeup was finer, the motions more elegant, and that was enough to make others felt as though they were below here. Was this still the silent, introverted Dijie? Just when Liang Shi couldn't manage anymore, she saw a few Yahuan help support Lao Tai Tai walk in. Her expression relaxed and she hurriedly stood and walked over. In the past, she didn't like Lao Tai Tai, but since Lao Tai Tai was here right now, most people would give Lao Tai Tai a few fractions of respect and so she wouldn't be surrounded from all sides. Lao Tai Tai held Liang Shi's hand and went to bow towards Chu Qingju. She was held up by Mu Jin but still politely said, "The fact that Wang Fei could come today, it is our good honor. Grandmother speaks too seriously, today is father's birthday, granddaughter will of course come." Chu Qingju gazed upon the smiling Lao Tai Tai. She smiled and said, "If grandmother talks like this, you have made granddaughter an outsider." This Lao Tai Tai wasn't some benevolent person. When Chu Qingju had been living in difficulty in the Fu, she hadn't seen this Lao Tai Tai say a word. In a woman's eyes, nobody could outcompete her son. Chu Qingju had expected she would show up at this time because she would know that Liang Shi would be in a bind. She didn't like Liang Shi, but she would let her daughter-in-law get shamed by others because that meant her son was being shamed. Even though this was a reality, but that didn't mean Chu Qingju would accept it. Everybody once again exchanged pleasantries before sitting. Chu Qingju sat on the carved wooden chair and didn't make any noise anymore. If somebody talked to her, she would return a few sentences. Slowly, the atmosphere cooled. Chu Lao Tai Tai saw that the mood was getting cold and understood that this was Chu Qingju purposefully making things difficult. But the other's position was high and noble now, so she could only flatter her. "The time is late. Why don't everybody follow this old body to the West Hall for the banquet?" Everybody's gaze swept towards Duan Wang Fei. Seeing her smilingly hold up a teacup, they knew that she didn't disagree and so they all stood. Chu Qingju stood and smiled friendly at everybody. She went forward to hold Chu Lao Tai Tai's hand, "Grandmother first." Chu Lao Tai Tai smiled and patted the back of her hand. She said in an intimate tone, "Such a Yatu, you are now Duan Wang Fei, you can't be doing such things." Others would laugh. The other Furin immediately complimented Duan Wang Fei's filial love. Even though Duan Wang Fei just slightly held for only a few steps before letting go, but who would say she didn't do well? Just when they reached the garden's exit, everybody saw a Yahuan walk over with a cape in her hands. She didn't seem to be wearing the Yahuan uniform of Chang de Gong Fu and tried to guess whose family she belonged to. At one look, Mu Jin recognized that this was Lian Qiao, who served at Wang Ye's side, and slowed her steps. Lian Qiao saw Chu Qingju and quickly walked in front and bowed. Then she said, "Wang Fei, Wang Yi saw that the sun was covered and was worried that you would get cold, so Nubi was sent to bring you a cloak. He also ordered that you shouldn't eat too much spicy food as it is fall and the wind is dry and cold, it will harm the throat and stomach. I'm not a child, there's no need to be so careful, Chu Qingju smiled as she lightly snorted. She looked to Mu Jin to receive the cape. I've received the cloak. You tell Qian Chong Xian to be vigilant, don't let Wang Yi drink too much. Lian Qiao noted it down and hurriedly retreated. Those present saw the cloak in Mu Jin's hands with the underlying grain of shoe brocade. They felt moved inside. Who said that Duan Wang didn't like Duan Wang Fei? It was just that the day got cloudy and he would anxiously send somebody over with a cloak and didn't even forget to warn about the food. Everybody present was a D-wife in their family. Looking at that cloak, an indefinable feeling of admiration rose. I, the Lord, Master, referring to the Duke in this case. See notes for a picture. Chapter 11 Confrontation. The West Hall of Chang de Gong Fu was specifically used for female gatherings, so the majority of the furnishings were vibrant yet well made. Inside, there were artwork and calligraphy of masters, and it looked as this was a home with some foundation. But it was to be obvious that each generation was worse than the previous. The present Duke of Changde was so preposterous that many laughed at him behind his back. Chu Qingju was at the same table as Chu Lao Tai Tai and her spot was beside Luo Lao Tai Tai. It was obvious from the seating the attitude that the Chu family held toward her. At the table, there were people who were willing to ingratiate themselves, so the mood at the table was somewhat busy. But when Chu Lao Tai Tai seated the Chu family's Sangunyang beside her, everybody's eyes changed. If this was a family banquet, nobody would say an extra word, but of the womenfolk present today, there were several females who ranked higher than Chu Lao Tai Tai. This Chu Sangunyang was both of a younger generation and was entitled. It really wasn't suitable for her to sit at the table. The Marquis of Baorong smiled coldly at Chu Lao Tai Tai's actions, understanding that this was Chu Lao Tai Tai wanting everybody at the table to meet Chu Sangunyang, but the timing just wasn't good. This old one has always preferred these two girls. Now that Diyatu has married, we've finally managed to gather together today. Chu Lao Tai Tai couldn't not know what others were thinking. She used her handkerchief to wipe at the corner of her eye. Now that these girls have grown up, this old lady still wants to keep them by my side all the time. One of the Furen that had good relations with the Chu family smiled and followed. This is Lao Tai Tai's love for her granddaughters. But when the children grow up, they can't stay at home. Sangunyang is the epitome. When she got there, she smiled mischievously. Chu Yusu heard those words and quickly dropped her head in embarrassment. Seeing her act like a little girl, Chu Qingju smiled at the woman that spoke. This person was on the side of Chu Lao Tai Tai Wei Shi. Her husband was an assistant minister at the Ministry of Rights, a not very large yet not very insignificant position. But this person usually only treated Chu Yusu courteously. At the beginning, both Chu Qingju and Shu daughter Chu Huishua hadn't come into her eyes. Wei Furen is very funny. At this time, San Mimi is the youngest and grandmother loves her best. Why can't she spend more time with grandmother? Chu Qingju smiled thinly at Wei Shi, and took the handkerchief Lu handed over to wipe her hands. It is her Mimi who has less time to spend with grandmother. Liang Shi heard what Chu Qingju said and felt anger stir. Chu Qingju was trying to ruin her daughter's marriage. Mentioning the second daughter, she was telling others that her, the D mother, wasn't benevolent, would only think of her own daughter and neglect the Shu daughter. Wei Shi paused and didn't seem to have any response. In the past, she had always ingratiated herself with her Gomu, one, in this manner. Today, she was firmly pushed back by Chu Qingju and just realized that the person sitting across from her wasn't the Chu de Gunyang of the past, but the noble and elevated Duan Wang Fei. Luo Lao Tai Tai smiled as she looked at Wei Shi, her eyes full of disdain. Who was Duan Wang? He was the second son of the emperor. His mother Jing Fei, 2, may not be as favored as Xu Fei, 3, but she still had some level of influence with the emperor. As to what Duan Wang was really like, nobody knew. But in the eyes of the entire court, Duan Wang might not be the most capable of the 4 imperial sons, but he definitely was not useless. Jin Shang, 4, only has 4 sons. The eldest imperial son Ning Wang, 5, had some power in the court. However, his birth was not high and his birth mother was only a Kiren. 6, the mother of the 3rd imperial son, Rui Wang, 7, Xu Fei was the most favored of the emperor, which spilled over to favoring her son. It was just that while this imperial son had some ability, his schemes were cruel and many were afraid of him. The 4th imperial son was Qing Wang. His mother was a Gui Pin, 8, but wasn't favored by the emperor. The emperor's attitude towards the 4th imperial son was not special, and as to the person Qing Wang, he was also average. Luo Lao Tai Tai didn't understand the politics of the court and government, but she wasn't too bad at examining people. This Duan Wang's future was most likely limitless. Her own family, the Luo family, might not have any desire to stand on any side, but they didn't want to offend Duan Wang. To be in the situation that Duan Wang was in, he either was truly as he appeared or he had very deep depths. But who in the imperial family was as they appeared? She had lived this many years, and saw many people, so she understood even more clearly what people could not be offended or what people, if offended, wouldn't be a problem. Duan Wang was the former, and Chang De Gong Fu was the latter. But she hadn't been correct about this Duan Wang Fei. In the past, she had only paid attention because she was born from a daughter of the Tian family. But now she felt that this Duan Wang Fei wasn't a simple woman. Thinking about it, she felt lucky. She didn't beg that Duan Wang Fei would be grateful towards her, but if she did, due to her previous care, create goodwill on the part of Duan Wang Fei to the Luo family and her daughter, it was a good thing. In the time it took to blink, many thoughts had formed in Luo Lao Tai Tai's head. On her face, she still had a friendly smile and complimented, "You can see that Duan Wang Fei still thinks for her sisters all the time." This old one's girls might occasionally say a few words, they cannot compare to Wang Fei. Lao Tai Tai is too modest. I've seen the sisters of your family before. Each is well educated in all aspects. Even my aunt frequently praises them. Chu Qingju received the goodwill of Luo Lao Tai Tai. Someday, get the Mimi to come to Wang Fu when they are free. My aunt is friendly and cares greatly for me, but she has no daughters. Even if I want to interact with girls like my aunt, I don't have anybody. Luckily, the sisters of your Fu will allow me to satisfy my desire. Lao Tai Tai, do bear to part with them and let them come out. Luo Lao Tai Tai heard that Duan Wang Fei's words were pointing out the care that her daughter had taken and, in passing, complimented her granddaughters. The smile on her face became larger. Wang Fei, don't praise them too much. If Wang Fei doesn't disdain them for being too wild, this old one definitely will take them to the Wang Fu to greet you if there is a chance. Everybody present had heard at least a bit about the care that Duan Wang Fei had received from Xiang Qing Ho Fu before her marriage. Hearing what she said today, they received some proof of the rumors. It did look like Duan Wang Fei was very close to her maternal uncle's family. It didn't waste the care that Xiang Qing Ho Fu had given her in the beginning. Everybody was women and naturally understood the dark side of the inner home. It looked like Duan Wang Fei wasn't that close to Chang De Gong Fu at all. In that case, when they will interact with Chang De Gong Fu in the future, they didn't have to worry about Duan Wang Fu. Chu Yu Su heard the discussion flowering around her. A smile was constantly on her face as though she didn't know what they were discussing. Seeing the dishes being brought up, she affectionately ordered a Yahuan to specially put a dish of fragrant and spicy tofu in front of Chu Qingju. Mimi remembers that Dejie's favorite dish is this one. A few days earlier, mother had ordered the servants to make this dish well. Dejie, take a taste and see if you still like it. White tender tofu sprinkled with green onions and pale yellow peppers and the red of the chili oil. It did look very appetizing. Chu Qingju smiled at Chu Yusu and nodded in agreement. Thank you, Mimi. This San Mimi of hers wasn't a simple person. Please, Wang Fei, forgive this newbie for being disrespectful, but there are some things newbie has to say. Mu Jin crouched, respectful yet helpless. A few days earlier, you had been sick for half a month. The entire Fu had been worried for you. The Tai had said that you couldn't eat anything spicy or oily. Now that you have finally recovered and Wang Yi has allowed you to go out the door, don't forget what Wang Yi had just said. Luo Lao Tai Tai heard those words and also persuaded, this Yahuan is a faithful one. I had heard that Wang Fei had been ill. Even though Wang Fei has filial love, but the body still needs to be taken care of. Fine, this Yahuan has served me many years. She is such a nag. I'm afraid of her. Chu Qingju seemed to sigh in helplessness. The medicine that Lao Tai Tai sent over earlier, I still haven't expressed my gratitude yet. Excuse me for saying a disrespectful thing, but this one saw Wang Fei grow up. Everything is fine as long as the body is healthy, that doesn't need any gratitude. Luo Lao Tai Tai pointed at a dish of pigeon soup. This pigeon soup would be fine for Wang Fei to drink. Get a Yahuan to serve a bowl to taste. Seeing Mu Jin pour a bowl of soup, an awkward smile appeared on Chu Yusu's face. The words implied that nobody at Changde Gong Fu was concerned about Dejie's illness and also mocked her mother for not being loving towards Dejie. Even the Luo family, who didn't have much of a connection to Dejie, sent over medicine, but her mother hadn't done anything. Once the word was out, what virtuous reputation would her mother have left? Chu Lao Tai Tai heard those words, her smile didn't change, but she took a few more looks at her daughter-in-law, Liang Shi. Liang Shi, sitting at one side, had managed to hear the meaning implied. She didn't think that the present Chu Qingju would be this forceful, but she had no way of explaining. She could only smile and say, Wang Fei was sick. Why didn't you let somebody send a word, to let mother go take care of you for a few days? I don't dare let mother labor. Chu Qingju had finished washing her hands and was wiping away the droplets of water that remained. Hearing what Liang Shi said, she jerked her lips in a smile. They say, a married daughter is thrown away water. This daughter didn't want father and mother to worry. There are a lot of servants in the Wang Fu. It was just a small illness, nothing that everybody had to know about. In the case of Luo Lao Tai Tai, it was because Jomu had somebody deliver things and received notice that I was sick. That was how she knew about my illness. These words were much deeper and even nastier than the previous words once understood. Duan Wang Fei mentioned it there. It was enough to make people speculate on how Liang Shi treated the daughters of others in the Huiyuan. Smiling as she saw Liang Shi pushed to the point of speechlessness by her words, Chu Qingju stopped talking and started eating. She wasn't afraid of ruining the good name of her paternal home. She wasn't even afraid that her husband's family will hate her due to the reputation of her paternal home. It was just a life she had picked up. She would live freely until she couldn't. But what she had picked up was another person's life. At least, when she was living freely, she could help the other finish the gratitudes and grievances of her past. If there was really a day when Duan Wang really became the emperor, or he failed in his attempt and wanted her life, she didn't think she would have any regrets. When she could still flaunt it, she would. Otherwise, maybe one day she wouldn't have a life. Chu Yusu looked at the elegant posture of Chu Qingju and felt inexplicably complicated inside. Even though her mother really didn't like her, but in private she still felt some sympathy for her Dejie. So she had always given her some of the jewelry and playthings she hadn't liked to Dijia. But now, the Dijia that needed her sympathy was a Wang Fei that even her grandmother had to be courteous to. As for herself, in the future, she might have to always be below her. Thinking about that, Chu Yutsu's slender brows slightly furrowed. Why did she have such a feeling of apprehension? The banquet meal ended. The servants of the Chu family guided everyone to the wide outer yard to hear a play. The stage had been built beforehand. The sexes were blocked from each other by tall screens. Even though everybody was in the same place, but they could only see the stage. The first play was Magu giving her birthday greetings, 9. Chu Qingju sat on the chair and watched coldly at Liang Shi, who was coming towards her with a sandalwood box. This Liang Shi was going to personally put on a play. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.